Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. Yeah. What's up, Mark? What's going on, bro?
What's happening?
Hey, man.
I'm good.
So welcome to the Atheist Roundtable, man. We're live and direct. We got Mark of Legend, round 2, so they said. What you reckon? Is it round 2?
It is round 2.
It's like
the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's like round 6 as far as chats for you and I think,
oh yeah,
maybe even more. And I got my noodly guy up here in the screensaver, so I'm gonna hide my face because
a man of mystery.
No, the StreamYard contacted me. They said if you have Mark of Legend on Jesus Mike and you show your face, you'll crash the system. You'll crash.
Too much beauty.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, too much. It's like a hybridization of atheist beauty and like let's go through it. This is a good way to segue in. We've got the second coming of Christ, right? A lot of people get this confused. I've heard Oz say this, and I want to clear this up. The 8th incarnation, not recarnation. It's the incarnation of Buddha.
Incarnation. Yeah.
Let's talk about the incarnation of Buddha. Let's start there. What's up with that?
Well, I mean, to me, the 8th incarnation of Buddha at a like a story level, linguistic level, is not really that much different than the second coming of Christ. I think that there's a lot of tooling with the scripture that happened the last 2 years, for instance, that really corrupted the message. And so when you think the 8th incarnation of Buddha, so there have been 7 Buddhas historically in the Buddhist tradition, and they believe there would be an 8th incarnation, which would occur at a time when neighbor was against neighbor, when there was wars and rumors of wars, when people valued many things over people. So you get a lot of these same similarities in the prophecy that you get from the Christ story. So the 8th incarnation of Buddha would occur at a time of great crisis and opportunity for human civilization and life in general.
Man, see, people hear that. They go back to that TikTok video that you brought out. It's April. I'm a goofball on TikTok. So I'm scrolling through TikTok. I'm like, who's this guy? This guy's great. He's got to be on my team. He's got to be on my team.
That's a lot of atheists thought that.
Right. So I mashed the follow. I hit that follow button. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I follow you anyway, dude. You're a stand-up guy. But to be fair and to be honest, I followed you thinking that you were very similar to me I thought you were being satirical, to be fair.
Yeah.
As I don't know if you've seen the Lozia boy, I think his name is.
Not sure.
He's another theist on TikTok. Well, he reminds me of the same vein. He's in that vein where he's clearly, now after getting to know him, he's clearly a theist, and I respect and appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he has this unique style where he does incorporate satire. He's cool to joke with.
Yeah.
And it's ambiguous at first. You're kind of, okay, what lane is this guy in? And your video grabbed me, so I was looking at it and I thought, I don't know. But then people in the comment section, it's theists that were coming at you, man. So let's talk about that. So theists are hammering away. What's up with this?
So I think that like the deep fundamental message of all religions is this pursuit of the mysteries, right? Because if you really sit back and think about existing, not only is it pretty terrifying, it's unexplainable. And so at the very basis, religion is trying to understand existence, the same way science is. But it got injected with what I call linguistic viruses. So some of those linguistic viruses guaranteed the for instance, the Catholic Church, that they would remain in control over human beings. And so, for instance, they set up a bunch of linguistic viruses in the text so that when someone finally said, "Hey, I'm God," which is what everyone should be saying, they would be programmed to attack. So they've got like an operating system, which is like Earth 2.0, but then they've got all these sub-programs. One of them is like, Christianity 7.6 or whatever, right? And so that one has like an antivirus that attacks any sub-program that says I am God, right? Think of it that way, like a virtual game. And so I got attacked because the book has it set up in such a way that no one is going to be able to claim that they are God or that they're the second coming of Christ unless they come down on a horse with the tattoo on both of their legs looking like white Jesus. And that's what we're dealing with. And so when I said that and I came out with that, it's impossible to penetrate that if they don't turn around and realize that they're being infected with poison psychologically.
Sure. So you think that upset more on the religious spectrum. You got the secular community just like, hey, who's this fella? And then you've got the Christians, hey, they're protecting what they believe is their one true God. They think that you're being blasphemous. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And you came under fire.
Ooh, badly. And like, I got that was like the first time, remember, I got like basically banned completely, where all my videos were under review all the time. I couldn't go live because they were reporting me like over and over again, because they were like, you got to imagine what it's like in their heads. In their heads, I really am sending people to hell if they believe what I'm saying. Like, so for them, there's real implications. And so I think a part of it really is altruistic, right? Some of it might be narcissistic too, because like I'm taking away, because they identify with this idea of Jesus coming down. So if I say that I am instead, it really hurts their ego, because they're so connected to this idea that me even saying that brings it into question. But there's an altruistic aspect to it, and that is they are worried that I'm literally sending people to hell by getting them to look away from the old ways and into the new ways, right? So I think that their reaction in a lot of times is genuine, and they're trying to be kind, but from my perspective, is they're confused, and so they're doing tactics that aren't okay, but they're justifying it, and justify the means. So they're dishonest. They were dishonest thing, like they're putting all those mean things in the comments. They were reporting me because they thought they were doing God's work by preventing me from connecting with people, which is
right,
super fascinating.
Yeah, and this is the interesting part about people in wearing my shoes, right? So I consider myself to be an agnostic atheist. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
So I'm regurgitating things that we've talked about. However, for anyone listening, one of my huge things, Mark, is freedom of speech and expression. So if you can't go on a platform that allows for that technically, or states that it does, and you get shut down or kind of silenced in a way for something, then I'm actually gonna stand on your side of the fence for that, regardless of what you're doing, as long as it's not filled with hate. And I didn't see anything at all that was hateful that you were doing. So let's go into when you came on our show. So you come on our show with this claim, and you spoke to these two knuckleheads. Who are these guys that you spoke to?
It was
Justin
Mike and Austin.
Mike and Austin. That's it. Mike and Austin. Right. So Oz is a unique dude. I love this guy. Oz is a brother of mine. Oz is a brand new guy walking in a atheist world. He just left the faith. Jesus Mike is such a pioneer in what he does, and he's been an atheist for a long, long time. So he's kind of had this worldview on his shoulders for a lot longer than Austin, and they kind of approached your perspective and what you claimed as your view of the world and what deities and gods should be. And I personally didn't like the show at all. It was actually my idea to revamp it, and I love that you wanted to reinvigorate the conversation. So what do you want to do tonight on the Atheist Roundtable if we bring on these two pit bulls that I've just neutered backstage? What you want to do with these guys?
So
you're gonna set them. You don't set them on fire, though. Don't set them on fire with your.
Nah, all the hell by fire and brimstone. That was just my character that wanted to do that. I convinced them otherwise. We're gonna have a nice, relaxed debate. But and I'm not going to baptize them in the lakes of Lake Minnetonka either, because I think that's just logistically it's just difficult. But I think tonight, so it's a debate, and so it's a zero sum game, right, or a non-zero sum game where it's like the idea is victory, so to speak, even if that's just in the back of your head. When you're going into a debate like this, where I'm saying something so intense, right, it's like you can almost walk into that from my statements initially and be like, this guy, we're going to smoke this dude. You know what I mean? And I get that. Like, and there's a funness to that. And so it's a zero sum game, like I said, like what -1, like so you walk in the idea of victory. And I think that maybe that approach it should have been less of the focus and more like a discovery too, and that's why I said in the first video, I didn't just say second coming of Christ, because I knew if I just said that we'd be viewing this only through the lens of the Bible, which I thought would be a huge mistake, because I disagree with certain things in the Bible that I think contradict the true message that Christ was trying to lay out, which I think Christ was predicting that we would become Christ. Like, I think that's a big fundamental belief of mine. And so I added the eighth incarnation of Buddha to sort of mesh those together, so that when people saw the video, they thought, okay, I have to look at what he's saying through the lens of both Christianity and Buddhism. Now, I would have mentioned more, because I think there's more that are connected, which is not enough time in 60 seconds. But I wanted to add at least those two layers so that it wouldn't be looked through one sphere. And I think maybe the first podcast, the episode, we were looking through only the Christian sphere of what I was trying to say. And I think that was the ultimate issue, to be honest.
Yeah, and with fairness to you, I noticed that the focus was on the God of the Christian Bible. So I did see that. And I also wanted to point out there was a slight bias on my end as well, because I think you and I had talked where you had given me much more information about other deities that wasn't publicized. So I kind of knew your background story maybe more than Mike and Austin did. So, there's a huge ball drop on my end, on Austin's end. We take ownership for that. Better research. And that's why I wanted to do a little preface here before they come in, because we do know your story now, and we do have a better approach. And I literally will become a Christian live on air tonight. Tonight, I'll become a Christian if Austin and Mike fuck this up. But it'll be to the Old Testament God, Yeshua.
Oh shit!
I like the.
You go full Abrahamic tonight.
Yeah, I like the God of the Old Testament. I like the R-rated version.
He's badass.
But yeah. But hey, and just quickly before we get into anything, let me just give a shout out to everybody that's in the comment section. We got a lot of folks in early. We got Chris Mallett from the Daily Atheist Morning Show. We got Kat, Sean. I don't know, Flashy T-Bird. I had the same nickname when I was a kid. Yeah. I got No Hair Mama Bear. We got Kobe in the house. We got Jesus Mike, whoever that is, not sure. Gavin from New Zealand. He's in the house. Oz, somebody mute him. And keep going. Oz is pretend supposed fiance. Nobody's ever seen her. This is yeah. Just Jeff is in the house. Nobody knows, but I saw him backstage earlier. So we do have Just Jeff in the house. And hey, Mark, before we kick it off, I'm about to bring the guys on. They're rabid. They're about to go knuckles deep into it.
They haven't.
Do you have anything that you'd like to preface before we get into the questions about your faith and belief?
I hope that we can channel the skeptics of ancient Greece. And so there's this common idea of what skepticism is. And that's something like, maybe someone says, I saw a UFO last night. And you're like, yeah, sure. I'm going to get this guy to realize he was wrong. To me, not saying that's the position of anybody here, but in general, it's a common mistake made by skeptical people. True skepticism is walking down the narrow path in between, holding no positions, and constantly seeking truth, not believing they'll ever actually find it, but possibly find something that's a glint of truth. So trying to walk that middle line, because to be completely honest with you, even as I stand here today, months into my statement, I still keep a very skeptical view of myself and my position with this. Every day I wake up in the morning and I ask myself if I'm just being like megalomaniacal, if I'm building a whole culture inside of my head so that I can self-justify what actually is a lunatic claim. I keep that in my head always. And so I think that in this debate, it's like, let us be so neutral that we can ask the best and most critical questions, right? And seek truth over victory.
I like that, Mark. I'm not gonna use it, but I like it. Well, hey, look, like a true businessman, just before we bring in the meat of the show, we're gonna do the little promo here. So over to the nerd, Just Jeff.
How's it going, everybody? You guys are looking good. Pasta got a new laptop with some advice from me, so I helped a boomer out, help him find a new computer, guys. What you can't find on our website is a new computer, but you can find some cool merchandise. There's new stuff. Of course, we have our classic Mute Oz t-shirt, which you can find here in several different sizes. And I'm glad to announce that the large size is now back available. So you can pick that up. Pick up 2 of them, just in case we don't have any more, Corona. Also in the shop, we have the hats and we have our John 3:16 t-shirt. So this one is a great conversation starter, as it has 2 different sides with 2 different pieces of the story. So you have Revelation on one side and John 3:16 on the other. It's fantastic.
Hey, you gonna call me out? Hey, you didn't even give me a discount on that laptop, dude.
You needed help, and I got you a laptop. I know how the 50 or older crowd does when they need laptops. And I can't help you reset your password when you forget it. Okay, so don't ask me to help you reset your password.
Every damn time. If anybody steals my laptop, they'll have my password too, because it comes with it. Go
get your notebook that you got on the shelf, that all your passwords in it, and then you got to go find it. I know how that works.
My password is thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for part 2.
I would highly encourage our WWJD bracelets. TART bracelets. Definitely not ripping off from that. And then also tumblers. You got some plastic cups. They are awesome. It will help. The water tastes better when it's in a cup like this. I mean,
it does
in reality,
it's like almost
it just has this pure flavor. Pure flavor.
Electrolytes. It comes with extra electrolytes.
Extra. Yeah. So yeah. And then, one of the more important things, the podcast content is up. So you can go through here to find some of our podcast stuff. And then also our upcoming schedule, which you guys know we have on tonight. Mark of Legend, round 2.
The Atheist Roundtable. Sorry.
Yes, the Atheist Roundtable schedule. And then also, if you want to be on the show like Mark, contact us here and you can book your appointment to be on the show.
Yeah. And just for the record, you don't have to have a claim like Mark to come on the show.
But it helps.
It does help. It
does help.
But Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on tonight and showing us all those cool nerd things that I have no clue how to do. So thank you so much, bro.
It's pretty difficult, I know, for you. You have that. We also, for those of you that don't know, we got Pasta a new phone. He's onto the smartphone now. We got him with the touchscreen jitterbug, so he's good on that now. It's got big buttons on it.
Huge buttons.
Huge. Okay, bye.
Dinah. Anyway, Jeff's frozen. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to bring in the man. Is it the man of the hour or the man of the hour? How do you say it, Jeff?
I say it's the man of the hour.
So how do we do this? Is it a hierarchy between Oz and Jesus Mike? You know, let's toss a coin. Who's your favorite? Jesus Mike's hair smells
Why would
better.
you put me in that position? Jesus Mike is my favorite because he lives closer to me.
Yeah, and his hair smells like papaya and mint. It's unique. Let's bring him in.
I think it smells like Pantene Pro V.
What's up, guys? Sorry, I was busy there polishing my belt from the last time that me and Mark had a conversation. And what's this?
Whoa, hold on a second.
Oh,
What's going on here?
we have Mute Oz.
Why is Oz's belt so much
Finally,
smaller?
finally, the Oz has come back to the round table. Shut up, Jeff.
Hold. All right. Well, I can see you guys are going to take this seriously. Okay. I got it.
We can be serious.
No, great stuff, guys. Hey, let's just say thank you to Jeff, our resident troll. Appreciate you, Jeff.
Did you like how I put you at a weighing in at 7,300 and something pounds? Or did that go over everyone's head?
No, no, you guys are great. So, are you guys ready to talk to Mark? That's what I want to get into. You can audibly speak. Are you guys ready to talk to Mark?
I'm ready. I couldn't hear you. It was chopping out my end.
Yeah. So I want to bring in Mark of Legend, and he is going to have to explain to you guys why it is he's going to get away with telling people he is the second coming of Christ and the 8th incarnation of Buddha.
Fair enough.
Let's get it.
Oh, big screen. Oh, gosh.
Oh, man.
So we got the gimmick and the gimmick.
That's right, kids. No.
For anyone that hasn't been watching, well, I assume you wouldn't be able to. We've been having a kind of back and forth between us on TikTok with more so Oz and Mark. I just wanted to tag on because I like wrestling. But they have been doing videos back and forth where Oz is being stone cold. And the thing that cracked me up the most was that Mark, I saw in a comment, just goes, "Why can't I be stone cold? Why did you get
That was my favorite wrestler, by the way.
Me too. That's why, and
So-
that's the bottom line. But let's dig into it. We want to make sure we get to the meat of the content here. So first and foremost, Mark, with all sincerity and appreciation, thank you for coming back to the roundtable. We appreciate it. And how are you feeling, man? How are you doing tonight?
I'm feeling great, man. I've been excited about this all week.
Cool. Yeah, we have to. We've been talking about it, and obviously, we've had fun promoting it. Also doing some more genuine, serious promotion. We hope everybody enjoys the show tonight. And like Pasta said, everybody that's in the comment section, even that came early, thank you for being here. Let's get started. So for everybody that's viewing tonight, and a refresher for everybody involved, Mark, I know you have identified yourself as a theist. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the one thing I wanted to ask you is the definition of theist is a person who believes in the existence of a god or gods, specifically a creator who intervenes in the universe. That being said, which god or gods do you believe in?
So, Carl Jung, the psychologist, right?
Familiar, yeah.
So Carl Jung, when asked if he believed in God, he said essentially, he's like, I don't believe in God. I know there's a God. And what he meant by that was that he had studied, it's called alchemy. And so he found a God through alchemy and through a massive conceptual shift of what God was for him. So if I were to say what God I believed in, I would say that I believe in the alchemical God. And I can go into more detail as to what that means exactly. And I guess it would come in conflict with one aspect of the regular definition, and that is, I don't think God intervenes. I don't think there's an external God that intervenes with the affairs of the universe. I think that we are God, and if we intervene with things, then God intervenes because we are God.
Okay, so if we can, just for time, so we're efficient with time and we get the most, we're most efficient with our time, then explain to us your definition then.
God is me, God is you, God is the rocks, God is this conversation. It's creator is created. And so I don't see a guy as like a God in the clouds. When I'm praying, I don't think I'm praying to some outside entity. I think I'm praying inward into parts of my brain that are dialed in to what is divinity. I think it's all in the brain, and that brain, of course, is networked to all other brains on the planet and all other matter in the universe. Like everything is super interrelated. All subatomic particles are intrinsically tied to one another through the forces of nature, and that all combined together is that web which makes up what is God. And so imagine it almost as a pantheistic God, but that there's one more layer that we can take responsibility as conscious beings to activate God in a more meaningful way in the universe.
Okay, right. So thank you for that, and that helps everybody involved, us and people watching and listening. So I want to go to the video that you did with Pasta Mike a week or so ago, and pull some things out of that first and foremost, because there was even a lot of good groundwork that you laid there. So one of the first things you mentioned was in childhood having, I think your exact words were strange feelings or stranger feelings growing up. And I don't know what you mean by that. Can you tell me about those feelings? What did that mean?
Yeah. So basically a prefix to all that is, I understand that these intuitive things that I experience subjectively, we can never come to some objective understanding of it being true or false, right? So I know everything I'm about to say. There's no way to prove it right? So I could just be talking out of my ass. And so I respect that completely. And so this intuitive aspect, we all have that thing called intuition, the gut feeling. We all have those experiences we've had where we just kind of feel like we know something to be true, but there's no way to empirically measure that. And so this conversation here will be that element of it. So we can analyze it, of course. And there's other, like through the framework of psychology, you can take me to task on it. But I understand, I'm not trying to prove that, because it's impossible for me to prove from my perspective, a subjective experience, and make it objectively valid. But when I was about 16 or 17, I started to get this very strange feeling that there was more to life than everything we had ever been handed. That it wasn't just material, that there was some sort of magical element to it, and that there was a veil that we could break. And once broken, we could tap into kind of fantastical things, what our society would deem as fantastical, magical, ridiculous, or whatever. I felt that those things were real. I felt that the stories of the fairies and the elves and the alien, or the angels and the demons, had some validity. How they actually manifested themselves in our reality was up for debate, but that those occurrences happened in one way, shape, or form. And I just, it was this intrinsic feeling. I'd been raised Christian all my life. I had no basis to believe that this was true, that there was some other magical element that existed outside the religion I was in, but I just couldn't shake the feeling. And so I just started doing a lot of like meditating and praying on my own, going out into nature. And I started to receive strange information. Like I would have dreams and they would be like, hey, you need to read this book. And I'd be like, okay. And then I would forget about it. And then I'd stumble upon that book and remember the dream like weeks later. And so a lot of these weird, and so I started reading these books, and one was alchemy, and another one was a Buddhist text. And all of these ones I started reading ended with the same conclusion, that all of these stories, like Jason and the Argonite, the Golden Fleece, the Philosopher's Stone, the Holy Grail, Christ consciousness, the Enlightenment of Buddha, were all exactly the same thing. It was a metaphorical story about human beings finally realizing they were God. And in so, there would be physiological changes, psychological changes to the human being that would actually transcend us out of what we thought was humanly possible.
Okay. And how did you I guess process those strange feelings or emotions? How did you process that? What did it look like to get from just feeling those things to where you are today? How did you arrive there?
So this is where the voice of God comes in. I would honestly, and this is going to be the part we really stray away from the logical side of it, is that I would get messages. One night I was it was a haunting. It was something like the door was shaking to my bedroom door. It was shaking, wouldn't stop. I woke up in the middle of the night and it was just shaking. I was terrified, and I prayed to Jesus. I was like, Jesus, please, whatever's happening, please make it stop. And this is the message I received. Is I can help you, brother, but eventually you're going to have to do it. It's going to be you. Look, and I know how insane that can sound, but that door was shaking. I didn't have any mental issues. I never hallucinated unless I was on a hallucinogen. At that point, I don't think I ever touched anything. I never touched it before. That door was shaking. There was something out there. I don't know what it was. And it happened several times. This happened to me over and over again during a certain period of time. And when I made that prayer, that's the message I got. And that sort of set me on it. And since then, like, I pray and I hear like messages and advice. And to me, what that is that it's dual in nature, that there's something hyperconscious, something higher conscious, but that it's just more daisy chained across the whole universe. But there is an inner part of the self that knows the right answer to things. So we can pray. It's like the law of attraction or the law of one or whatever you want to say. Your brain has a lot more answers to the questions you have in your life. You just don't know how to tap into it. And so what I guess the guiding principle was this more intelligent and informed part of my brain finally communicating with the present conscious part of my brain. And so that's how I navigated it. I get a weird thing, I'd sit with it, I'd meditate, I'd ask myself the question, well, what next? And it would take a little bit and my brain would pop something out, I'd follow it, and it led me to the next step.
Okay, so in that, the feelings growing up, and then I think you said 17 or 18 years old, the door shaking, you prayed to Jesus, now you took, that next step, whatever that looked like. Excuse me. How did you know that it was God or Jesus that was talking to you or connecting to your brain? I think is what you said. How did you just default to God?
Well, I didn't default to an Abrahamic God, and I didn't default to Christ, the person who lived 2,000 years ago, who died and became an ascended master. At that point, I was starting to tap into these ideas that all of our lower G gods, and I refer to Christ as a lower G God, and that may offend some people, but that's my position, and I'm sticking to it. We have these lower G gods like Christ, Krishna, Buddha, Azrael, Lucifer. And I started to stumble upon this idea that came out of Jungian psychology, also Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, who were kind of like spiritualists slash pseudo-psychologists, who believed that all of these principal deities or these lower G deities were actually just psychological concepts. Like you think Egypt, you have Osiris, Horus. Osiris is a symbol for being blindly or willfully blind. The process of aging in life causing you to be jaded and not be able to see the new transcendent future. Horus being the new mind that can see the landscape and have a vision for the future. So when I was praying to Jesus or I was praying to God, I was very cognizant of the fact that I may have just been tapping into certain areas of my own mind that represented these archetypal ideas that have been here for thousands of years. Okay,
so you don't really, and please, if this is misrepresenting, just correct me. So you don't know for a fact, or you're not even necessarily asserting that it was God. It could have just been your brain. Is that what I just heard?
No, there's no difference or distinction. God and the inside of my brain they're the same thing.
Okay.
God and the inside of your brain is the same thing, but it's not trivial. There's a place, my belief is that there's a place inside of our brain that once we tap into it, we will release the power of God on earth. And that's what Christ did. If you look at the Michelangelo painting, I think it's the best visual representation of this. The one, I think it's called Adam and God, or just Adam, where Adam's reaching out with his finger to touch God, and God is almost reaching him. He's on a cloud, but if you notice, that cloud is almost completely anatomically correct to the human brain. What Michelangelo, I think, was trying to communicate there was that as soon as we become in touch completely with all parts of our brain, we will become God, and we will have the power of God. God will touch us.
Okay, so then would you, or I guess, are you insinuating that each of us as humans, that our brains are gods. Is that what you're saying?
Think of it like this. You're in a video game. You play a VR video game. You're sitting on your chair playing the game. You go into it and you build a bunch of non-playable characters. And then you stay in the VR for a very long time. And you forget that you're sitting on your couch. And so all of those NPCs, including your avatar, are all aspects of you that you've created, except you've forgotten that you're sitting on a chair playing a video game. It's the same thing in a dream. If you ever lucid dream, I don't know if you ever had that experience where you realize you're dreaming and then you can actively do whatever you want in the dream. When I lucid dream, I'll go up to characters in the dream and say, hey, you know, you're just me, right? You're inside my head. And all the characters will be like, no way, man. And it's kind of funny because you're actually literally having dialogue with the inside of your brain in the dream state. And they're denying the fact that they exist inside your brain. That is a direct, precise analogy to what's happening in this reality. So it's not just the brain, is everything. Like, this is God's dream, or what the Buddhists might call samsara, the myriad of things broken up out of the single consciousness that is the entirety of the universe. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I think I just got a little more confused. So in one part you said that, let me make sure I get this right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that we all need to come together and eliminate the little g gods.
Yes.
And come to this one religion of whatever the one religion God is. You can, when I'm done, you can say what that is. But I feel like that is now contrary to what you just said on my interpretation.
If you could elaborate, because I'm not sure how it's a contradiction.
Because you just said that we are all gods.
Yeah.
And everything around us are gods. Did I hear that right?
Everything is God's dream.
Okay, everything's God's dream. So we're all just living in God's dream or a matrix. Is that what's going on?
Well, we are God, so we're the ones dreaming. But yeah, like, we're in it, but we're just aspects of God, so we are God dreaming. So like I want to make sure there's no disconnect between the God dreaming and all the aspects. So creator is created, if that's possible to reconcile. Creator is created. Like, all the things that are here are also the creator. Like, it's not that God is outside manifesting it. So I guess one part of the VR thing is it doesn't connect to the analogy, and that is that the person sitting on the couch has an external influence, right? Well, they're fully in VR, so they don't have external influence because they're operating inside of it. It's not that there's an external influence or external creation. God came into the universe and is the universe in entirety and exists within it, right? So it was created by this thought of manifesting itself, but it also is all the things that are in creation. And so in the end, let's say if there's an end, when the universe collapses down to nothingness, it'll be singular consciousness. But that singular consciousness is what expanded out into the universe in the first place.
So, and I'm trying to follow you because I've been studying this stuff for especially the last 3 days, trying to make sure I to the best I can get my mind wrapped around it. And you do have a unique view on this in some areas. So I want to make sure that, like I said, that I'm getting this. So we are gods. But are you saying that we are gods and there is still a God? Or we are all just collectively God?
We are collectively God.
Okay, so that's what I want to know. How did you arrive there? How did you get to the place where you believe that we are all gods? And if that's the case, how do we then break down that you were the return of the Messiah and the eighth incarnation of Buddha? And I don't know if you've claimed anything else, but like how do we get there?
All right. So the first question, it was intuitive at first. I just felt it. Like like the way these messages come in is they're very complex feelings that then take me a period of time, could be a minute, could be 6 months, to unpack and translate into words. And so one of the first messages I got was this thing. At first, it was just a feeling of interconnectedness, deep and incredible reverence and awe for being able to be alive and be able to be cognizant of being alive. And so then that led me to start typing, right? So I started looking at all the different religions to see if I was feeling something that other people had felt. And sure enough, I found it. I found it in Buddhism. And so I'm able to use a lot of Buddhist terms like samsara, the myriad of things, because those things directly represent this idea of being in, like, we're almost in a dream state. Zen Buddhism, same thing. They have a lot of the same principles. Alchemy and Hermeticism and Kabbalism. And so I started to basically find my roots in those who had already made this journey before. Interestingly enough, because I had done a voyage away from Christianity, I fell right back on Christianity, then went deeper into Islam and Judaism, because they had parts of the truth as well. And so I started to realize that maybe Jesus Christ's message was a little different, and that there were some changes made. And I did some research, and I also found the changes that were made in the Council of Nicaea, where they were in hot debate over whether Jesus was God who became man or man who became God. And this was largely a philosophical war between the Gnostic Christians and what we would call the Orthodox that arised out of it in Constantine's Rome. And so those is how I found my structure. It first came as a feeling, but then I searched the feeling, because I like to think that on many levels I am empirical about this. I do try to be logical about this. There's things I can't be logical about. There's things that's happened to me that I can't explain to you. Things I won't say to just about anybody, because they're wild and really magical, and they defy any ability for any instrument to test and measure it. But the things that I can test and measure, the things that I can hyperlink across multiple historical texts for some sort of validity, that's what I work on. The other things that I can't do anything to prove, I just say, well, it's a feeling, and I'm going to try to follow it and see where it takes me.
Okay, and that could take us down another 2-hour rabbit hole.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
And I want Mike to be able to jump in here and ask some questions too. So the last one for now, until we kind of jump into an open discussion here a little bit. We in the video you talked about language and words being magic, or a magical box that we can use, and I was listening to that, and I actually rewound that a couple times when I was listening to it, because I do believe that language is a powerful tool that we have as humans, and I think a lot of harm and a lot of good can do or be done by what we say, and sometimes what we don't say. But in there, you spoke about parents being able to say something to their child that would either cripple them or would change their life for years or decades to come. And again, I agree.
Yeah.
But what I would ask is, that's nothing. There's nothing new under the sun. That's not a new. That's not a new thing. Even the Bible says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. So and I know, and I kind of did a little research, leading up to this. That's even in other holy books talking about the power of the tongue, or power of words. That's that type of thing. So in that, what is the need of Mark or Oz or Jesus being another God to just repeat what all these other gods have already said? What's the purpose in that?
Because the world is melting down based on the things all the other gods said. We're in meltdown. We're in meltdown. Huh? We're in meltdown. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I was just saying, but it's different verbiage, but you, even in that video, you said the same thing that the Bible says, just different words.
Yeah, well, here's the problem. It may be not anything new under the sun, but it's absolutely not mastered. If we had a profound understanding of what that phrase meant, we wouldn't be falling into chaos in the world right now. The world's falling apart. And it's about time we started admitting that in a deeper and profound way, that's not just complaining and sharing, 2020 memes, taking high responsibility for the fact that everything that comes out of our mouth can change the world in an instant. And the things that have been coming out of our mouth for 2,000 years have slowly been bringing us to an actual apocalypse. So as much as it may be an old thing, we haven't been doing it right. We've got a bunch of technological revolutions and advancements. We're flying to Mars soon, but we can't even seem to have a civil conversation with each other. So no, there needs to be more of a focus on words and how we use them than anything else. And that's like the big part of the point I made with Pasta Mike was that is our highest form of magic. And if there's anything that Buddha or Christ left behind, it was their words. That's the only thing that holds any power. 2,000 years later, and Christ still has so much control and power over such a large group of people. Now, some people do good with those words, and they read the right ones and understand it. Some people have done terrible things with those words because they either misinterpreted them or the wrong ones were placed in the Bible afterwards by people in high political and religious office who wanted to control people. So we need a revolution with the way we use words.
No, and I appreciate that. And well, I definitely wanted to Mark later come back around that because I agree with a lot of it, but I think we probably disagree. But J. Mike, what kind of questions you got for Mark? You're muted, buddy.
Yep, that helps, doesn't it? I would say, Mark, thank you again, man, for coming back
Thanks
on
for having me.
letting us. Yeah, I want to do this the right way, and get a better dialogue. So I guess I'll jump around a little bit because what you mentioned there is a question I was going to ask a little later, but since it's relevant, especially in regards to what you said about the Council of Nicaea and things like that, and not really to get into the theology about it because it's not really as important. But you mentioned, Jesus basically was a man that became God, and you also mentioned like Buddha in one of the videos I watched, kind of reaching the same level of that anointment. How did you become sure that the sources that give us the details of their life is reliable and accurate?
I was able to, like I said, sort of hyperlink or interrelate all of the stories to each other. And then those things completely affirm the intuitive experiences and the strange dreams that I had where I was told these things would be discovered and I'd be able to connect them together. Then it occurred and I verified it through multiple texts. Now, a lot of these texts are metaphorical. They're fictional stories in some sense, but some of it is valid as well. And so obviously we can never come to some absolute assertion. But here's another thing, and this is basically the question I pose atheists and skeptics. A lot of time we come up with these claims, whether they be theistic or something as radical as what I'm saying. And there's a lot of refutation and there's a lot of challenging in the place we're currently at. But I never hear a skeptic or an atheist call upon a serious investigation with empirical method, with instruments, and with serious analysis. Like, it's not taken seriously enough. It's kind of like ghosts and UFOs. It's like it's thrown to the fringes. And like maybe what needs to happen is scientists and skeptics and atheists need to take this as seriously as physics, even if it's just to try it out. Give it 6 months. Create a science that tests this stuff, but it hasn't been done. So I can sit here all day and talk about my claims, but if a system isn't developed based on your guys' position, the burden of that proof, right, lies on you because you guys have the instruments and you guys know how to use them, and you need to apply them in a serious way that I don't think it's being applied. It's like, how do you build a system of analysis for what I'm saying? You hear everything I'm saying, and then you say, okay, how do we really accurately test this? What kind of instruments can we use? What sort of psychological processes can we use? What have they used in the past? I don't think there's a critical and serious enough respect for these claims because they seem kind of outlandish, but we can't say anything until we actually create a real system, the same way we have a system for physics and chemistry and psychology.
Sure. I mean, I would agree in some aspects, and that it's something that we should definitely test. I wouldn't agree with it. The burden of proof would be on that end, because I'll use an example that you said. You said in your first video, you said, I want to test this hypothesis as much as you. Yeah. And we'll use you as me. We'll just input me into that. Mm-hmm. And I really want that hypothesis tested. But since it's not my hypothesis, or the scientific community's hypothesis for that matter, would it be fair to say, falsification is a very important component within these, within any hypothesis. So how would we go about falsifying your claim?
By running the scientific method, creating your own hypotheses and building out, because that's what I do on a daily basis. Like, I'm always testing new things.
If you had if I was like, all right, I think all swans are white. And then I was like, how could I falsify that? Well, so I would have to observe a swan that is not white. And then that would prove my hypothesis that swans are white are not true. And then I go to Australia and I see a black swan, and that falsified it. What specifically would you have that would falsify it? Because of course we'd use the methodology, of course.
Yeah.
What would it be specifically?
Well, so for instance, the swan being white is a decent analogy, but a swan being white is quite easy to falsify or prove that claim, because all you have to do is look at a black swan. Mm-hmm. This is extremely more complex than that. So what you have to do first is break down each individual piece. And so I say I'm the second coming of Christ, and then you ask me, well, what does that mean? What does the second coming of Christ do? Right. Mm-hmm. And so then I lay out each one. So how we do it is, you'd ask me some of my beliefs on what I think the second coming is supposed to do or capable of doing. And then we test each individual thing out. And so, for instance, one of the major ones is the second coming of Christ offers, the second coming will offer a radical change in politics, economy, religion, sex, everything. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to offer. And so, I mean, for instance, you can ask me what I think needs to happen with capitalism, and I can tell you what I think needs to change. For instance, like it has to be proven, because it's the word and the language and the reformation of ideology, which is the most important aspects of the second coming. And so it's a longer process, I guess, but you prove it, the validity through it is when I apply these principles and these ideas to the things I'm trying to change, if the change occurs.
Sure. And I think what you said is interesting in the sense, because I actually have a question that lines up with that. If someone can truly become God anointed or a Christ, if you will, mm-hmm. in that terminology, could we, I'm not expecting you to do it right now, but maybe it is easier. Could we list out the exact steps so that A, we could do what you're saying, test it, repeat it, verify it, and attempt to falsify it, and B, serve for the common man to attempt the same thing that you're doing? What would those steps be?
So I'll give you a great example, because I'm testing all these things out on a daily basis. And so I'll give you one example. Language, like I said, the application of language is the most powerful tool of an awoken one, right? Yeah. So I had a friend who
that video, I think you said the exact same thing.
So I had a friend who I saw that they'd be really good at investing. They know a good idea when they see it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this person making a shit ton of money. And so I started to really be careful how I spoke to him, in the sense that I tried to create very, very encouraging and powerful affirmations for him. And I meditated it every day, and I imagined him doing well. And then I taught him some principles of stocks, and he made $2,000 within 3 weeks of me doing it. And now there's nothing magical about that, because I think I figured out empirically how it works. But I went from him losing $100 over the course of a year to making $2,000 in a month. I'm no stock ace, right? I know a thing or two, but it was these layered affirmations that I gave him over and over again, that he was going to be doing great. I even saw him as I see you doing it great in the future. It was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay. And then he did well. What do I affirm that to? Me getting better and better at mastering language so much that I can help someone take command of all of the resources of their brain, right? Mm-hmm. That is the Christ in and of itself. Is for your words to cut like a spear, and when they're hit, they're an immovable object.
Okay, so I get what you're saying, but would those be part of the steps that you're using? Like if it was me, what steps am I taking to?
Yeah. So let's say you had a problem in your life that you wanted to fix, and you'd ask me to fix it, and then I test out my hypothesis. Now on the other side, just as Christ said, you must believe too that it can happen. But and a lot of this stuff is practical. All right. If you say that, like you were talking about your wrists being in pain, right? A lot of that is just accessing the resources of healthcare or chiropractor, acupuncture, these sorts of things. But I do believe that when you think a certain kind of thought, it sends electrons or photons across neurons, and it goes directly to your muscles, and those muscles can be stimulated, and blood flow can be increased, and the natural healing process of the body, and can heal your wrist faster than it normally would have, based on psychological limitations. Here's an example. No one was running. We talked about this in the thing with Possum Mike. No one was running the 4-minute mile. No one thought it was even possible. People said it was humanly impossible. And then some guy does it, and then it happens a bunch of times, like within 6 months to a year. It went from it's impossible, humans can't do it, to a bunch of people are doing it. So what does that tell us? I mean, I think that it's irrefutable that it wasn't a physical limitation. It was a psychological limitation. So what I'm arguing here is there even a line there?
I was going to ask you, wouldn't there be a clear line in the idea that I will not be able to fly, and we can look at just simple biology to determine that, without the aid of some kind of technology or apparatus?
Well, simple biology isn't enough, right? Because there's physics, there's quantum physics. The other day,
even physics alone, we could use just alone.
Yeah, but quantum physics we can't. Because quantum physics isn't as solid and sure as we think. There's a lot of very strange things 100%. Happening.
100%.
And you think about the now released discoveries from the Pentagon. There was a great interview on Joe Rogan. Those ships that they saw, they believed wholeheartedly that they were defying the forces of nature. But these are very, very respected, decorated fighter pilots who saw this and said, "This is impossible. It's absolutely impossible." Is it high technology, right? And I know we're diving a little bit into this, but this has been released by the Pentagon now. It's being affirmed by, I think, credible people. So I think it's a realistic example to use. Is that iron technology, or is there something dealing with the mind? Well, what I'm trying to do is not prove to you that I can fly or that I can shoot sparks from my hands, but that I think we should open up our perspective and think that, well, what if we could? How would it happen? I think we have way too many hard limits in our brain from 2,000 years of psychological program that has oppressed us, whether it be from the Catholic Church, whether it be from the materialist movement, whether it be from postmodernist movement. I think we've put too many hard limits in our brain. And what I want to do is break those hard limits and then see what happens. The same way that guy that ran the 4-minute mile broke that hard limit, and incredible things happen. I want to break the hard limits of the mind, basically.
I get what you're saying. I would want to, I guess, ask you real quick that you do believe that science leaves those things open. If somebody, even if you have a theory and you prove your theory wrong, I mean, you get points for it. I mean, you're not going to see a lot of arrogance within the community. People are constantly trying to offer up ways to potentially, falsify a hypothesis or want to do that for that reason. I mean, of course, there's bias in those kind of things, but I guess, and I don't want to.
Just one thing. I just want to interject once.
Yeah, of course.
But you just said that we can't fly because of biology, so that's a hard limit. That's not open.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that so it wouldn't to say so. Science doesn't make proclamations of truth. Science doesn't say we cannot fly. It's to say that we have no evidence to suggest that we can fly.
So, would you agree with me? Or would you agree with me that it's possible that human beings can fly without any technology?
I would say the possibility would have to be demonstrated, but yes, I would say without technology, you could. I guess it depends on your definition of flying too.
Like me, do you think it's possible that I can take off from this chair and fly to you now and give you a smooch on your cheek?
I don't think it's been demonstrated to be possible, but I don't think it's impossible because I don't know how I would determine that. Same thing with God. I can't prove a universal negative and say I don't know how I would do that. I just can say that there's no evidence for me to believe that, and under determination principle, there's always a rival theory. There's always somewhere where you can take the evidence and lead it to any way you want, which is why falsification and things like that are important. So that's why, for me, I feel like, and the underdetermination principle is very important in that regard, because you're basically showing that we could be a lot of different things, and under principles of fallibilism, where you could be wrong, you're just simply saying, the knowledge could be wrong or in that regard. But I have a question in regards to a lot of the things, and I could be wrong, but I want to hear your response on this. But I feel like a lot of the stuff you say, I agree with to a lot of points in the natural realm. I think that some of the things you take, I'm finding a hard time finding the connection between how you are what I would call almost ad hoc adding this thing to it. So if I could use an example, you're taking like a natural concept, and one of the videos you said magic's the most powerful language.
Language is the most powerful magic. Yeah.
Dixia. So you said language is the most powerful magic, and I'm curious to what your response would be to somebody who says, I think you're a great person. I think you have an amazing heart, right? And clearly me and you would probably understand what they meant by heart. Like, good character, like that. We come to find out that this person actually has like a cholesterol-filled heart. So now we know, they didn't mean they actually had an amazing heart, especially if it was their doctor telling them this, in a character sense of saying you have an amazing heart. So when you say language is magic, how are you referencing language to have more value than the aforementioned metaphors? Like how do you get to sneak past that? Because I feel like there's baggage that you're kind of sneaking along there that needs to be checked. Does that make sense? Like how would you?
It went over my head a little bit. If you could just elaborate.
Okay, so we have like examples like a metaphor of I think you have a good heart, and then we can find out that person does not have a good heart, and we go, okay, well that clearly that person meant they had good character. And I think the same thing's being done with when you say language is the most powerful magic we have. Magic carries baggage to it, right? So if you're using it metaphorically, that's fine. But I feel like with what you say, it's not metaphorical. Like I feel like you're adding some value to it that the metaphor that I'm using does not have. It's not purely a metaphor.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah, I get it now.
Yeah.
So this is the same thing as God. I'm not sure I found more than maybe I could count on one hand, people who really understand what I'm saying about God, because I've made such a massive conceptual shift in God that it's difficult because it's new grounds, or it's very old grounds, but we've lost it. Because like Zoroastrianism, ancient Buddhism, alchemy, they understood this. The same thing goes for magic. I mean it in what you might say, like the Hermeticists and the witches believe magic is that through certain manipulation of language and behavior, we can manifest cascading material effects to the universe. And so here's an example, okay? This is something we can all get on board with. Depression and anxiety can cause physiological response, right? We know that, right? We can all agree on that, right?
Well, I mean, there's some people that might not, but
will they be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because depression and anxiety, in and of itself, if you have an anxiety attack, you're pumping cortisol and adrenaline into your body, and over time you can get adrenal exhaustion, and cortisol makes you overweight. And so we can draw that connection that anxiety and depression does cause physiological effects, and those effects are negative. And so if I can use my language in such a way that I can reduce or eliminate somebody's anxiety and depression, and it has a physiological effect on their body that's positive and increases their health, to me, that's magic. So it's just a conceptual shift of magic. It's not flying wands shooting sparks out. It's being able to use frequency and vibration, because we need to break this down, because we live in the context of these languages and inside of those cultures. And so we're in this box, stepping out and trying to see a person talking to somebody without being able to put any labels on that, and seeing that at the base of it, it's using sound frequencies to affect someone physiological. To me, that's magic. And that's what they used to call it. And I think that's why spelling has the root word of spell, as I said to Apostle Mike.
Yeah.
I think we need to start, it's just a conceptual shift.
No, and I get the conceptual aspect of it. I just think that in a sense, when you're using like language right now to mold magic a certain way, which I think is more telling that we get to do a lot with magic a lot with language that we shouldn't do. And presuppositionalists do this all the time with like the law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. They think they're like actual things, where the law of identity is is just logic, it's just language we use to describe how reality actually is. It's just a descriptive tool. So would you not see, I got just one last question here, which is, could you not see how the language can be manipulated in that way to make you think, that would be the case, irrespective of it externally being true?
Well, no, because I just explained it quite accurately how it can be viewed as magic. We use sound frequencies come out of our mouth, and those sound frequencies have physiological effects on other people's bodies. To me, that's one definition of actual magic.
But isn't that part of a naturalistic worldview?
As in like material reality tested in science, that kind of thing?
I'm a physicalist, for example.
Absolutely.
So what I'm trying to point out is I'm trying to see how you justify that not being an ad hoc rationalization, to just say that we can do it.
Because I'm trying to assimilate the two things. I'm not trying to prove one over the other. I'm trying to assimilate the ideas of magic as they are supposed to be, like as they originally were discovered, and get people to realize that, for instance, a psychologist is a high magician. I want people to add
term. Huh? It's just how you view the term. Is that what I got?
It's more important. It's more important than that. And here's why.
Okay.
If I can truly assimilate this idea that words are powerful magic, I think if people really get onto that, they'll understand they have such a higher responsibility and privilege with every single word that comes out of their mouth. Because currently, I think that's the biggest problem in our world, is people aren't taking responsibility for everything that comes out of their mouth. To view it as a powerful magic, like an abracadabra, or the one that killed, the killing curse in Harry Potter. To understand that your one word out of your mouth could be a killing curse on somebody. Like you could say something to somebody and they were on the edge, and then they go home and they kill themselves. I think by bringing this in, right, what I'm doing is trying to get people to, one, realize that across the board, science, religion, everything has a lot more in common than they don't. They're not versus each other. They're talking about the same exact thing, and they're arguing because they don't realize that all the definitions are the same. And that's what I'm trying to do, is assimilate language and unify culture based on religion and science, for instance, or all the individual religions. Here's just a real perfect example. I'll be quick. The Big Bang, what happens in the Big Bang? Tons of energy comes out, potential, lot of frequency, right? Frequency disturbs space-time. And then out of that frequency manifests particles, right? And so any particle is both a wave and a particle at the same time. We view it as particle and it feels solid, but it's 99% space. And it's actually the electromagnetic force that actually gets us to come close to touching things, but we never do. And so we know that it's frequency, right? That manifests all the illusion of reality on one level. Now in the Bible, it says God made the word flesh. Those are the same thing. Word is sound frequency, flesh is particle. And this is the kind of things I'm trying to do, because what I think is the most important thing for us to do is realize we're all talking about the same thing and we're not versus each other. We've been playing this.
I think I agree. Yeah. And I'll pass this to Oz because I know they're gonna. We got more to go into, and I'm taking up some time. But I feel like, yes, same side of the coin in a sense. We're talking about the same thing. I just think that there's baggage that's being added that we could just define in completely naturalistic terms, and we don't need to use these labels. To me, it seems like it conflates and confuses people more than anything.
Well, I'll say one thing. I'll say one last thing about that. That's how we have been doing business as usual, and the world's falling apart.
The world's always been falling apart, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, but
I'm the referee has to step between them. Ding, 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 ding.
Because of the style of thinking.
Yeah.
We're just going to take a very short interlude because, Mark, you actually have a shit ton of questions in the comments. So what we're going to do, Mark, I'm going to push pause for a moment. We're going to have Murder Shed Steve come in and read some questions to you, so you get a different frame of mind from some of the viewers. Mike and Oz are going to go get some refreshments because they're coming in for round 2. So round 2 is going to be a little bit more. Oh, okay, he's kissing them guns, man. Round 2 is going to be a little bit different, but we're going to introduce Steve. Hey, is Steve? Are you still having that feud with Steve, Mike?
Me, that was Jeff.
Oh, it was Jeff. It was Jeff.
Me and Steve are always boys, dude. There ain't no problem with me and Steve. We're the tightest out of anybody. So screw you guys.
I was going to say, because at the end of the day, if you get on the wrong side of Steve, that's it. You're going to go meet Mark.
Why do you think Why do you think I'm saying this right now? That guy's crazy.
It's a go meet
Like,
Mark.
hey, Mark.
I just got that. Meet Mark. It took me a second.
Why do you think I'm being nice to Steve? That dude.
So it's time for Q&A with Murder Chef Steve.
Wait. Can you provide evidence that a god exists? Oh, well, hello, everybody. So I've been drinking absinthe all night, so I will not be held responsible for my godly interventions, okay? Anyhow, hey, how's it going, Christ? Jesus?
I'm doing very well.
And Jeff. Who put Jeff in here?
Not me.
Look at him. He just slicked back his hair and combed it and all that.
We got Fonzie from the
comb
Happy
his hair?
Days.
Did he brush his
combed it.
hair for this segment?
He
What the-
did.
It's a treatment. It's a hair treatment.
Every time,
Jesus,
every
in the
time,
morning.
You know
every
what?
time I hang out with him, he just hits a vending machine and a drink comes out, just like the Fonz, man. It's so cool.
Hey, Mike, I heard what you said. And somebody mute Oz real quick because we have a question from Brian Hagerman. If we are analogous to people in God's dream, how would we know this? And how does Charlie Brown know that he's a character in a comic strip?
It's a very good question. So we can never know, but here's the two ways I would analyze it. One, like I told you before, there's a bit of intuitive feeling, and I don't know if you guys heard of or believe the potentiality for lucid dreaming and astral projection. But some people have these experiences where they go so far, so to speak, that they enter into places that feel more real than this place, as if they've left this universe. And when they return, it feels a little bit less real. And so there's that intuitive side of it that I can intrinsically feel that there's a more substantial reality. But I think Elon Musk said it best, okay? And so again, this is just a breadcrumb trail. But he said, for instance, if we are to assume that video games get any better over a course of time, there'll be a point in the future where they'll become indistinguishable from reality. And now if we integrate things like VR, you could enter into a VR game. If you stay long enough, there's a potentiality for you to forget you're there. And so it's more an odds game. And so like Elon Musk said, the odds that we are in base reality is like 1 in a billion. It would make more sense that we were actually in a less substantial reality being projected from another place. And on top of that, there's some quantum physics findings that are actually pretty fascinating. And they're finding now that black holes at their very center collapse into two-dimensional space. And I'll try to make this really quick. When you delete information off of your computer, the amount of heat that's released as a result of deleting that information has a direct correlation to the amount of information you delete. When they discovered that, it was amazing. So when you delete X amount of zeros and ones, you also release a constant amount of joules in heat from your computer. So they played with this. And so what they're able to do is interrelate the amount of joules of energy to an amount of data. And what they found when they tested joules in a given space is that the joules, or the amount of energy, didn't have anything to do with the volume of the space, but instead the area that this space was enclosed in. And what scientists are now saying that really screams that we're in a holographic projection. On top of the fact that we're dealing with this idea that when you look down at a particle, because it's indistinguishable from a wave or a particle, and in fact, in some ways, they're existing as both at the same time. Now, a hologram, right, and a hologram in our reality is us shooting frequencies, light, and creating something that appears to be material. And so there's these cutting edge things happening in quantum physics that are more and more and more lending weight to the fact that we are in a holographic projection, which in a lot of ways you could see a video game as such.
And the Horizon used to say the Earth was flat.
The Horizon?
So I've got a question for Ben from
That went
Ben
over my head,
G.
Murder Shed. I don't know. I think I'm just a simple man.
No. I was just saying that they used to think that the horizon was proof that the Earth was flat.
Well, that's a bit more simple than what I just said. A lot more
Agreed.
simple. A lot
Agreed.
more simple.
Yeah.
Like super less simple.
That's why the underdetermination principle is important to mention.
We have a question from Ben G. I'm going to kind of steal your thunder, I think, Mike, especially because of those earlier comments. With Ben G's question here, in what ways is the world falling apart that it hasn't before?
In the complete destabilization of major American cities across the world, in a very dangerous psychological experiment with mass media and social media that is causing record amounts of anxiety and depression and suicide, that it's now being linked in peer-reviewed articles in psychology. And we all have nukes all around the world, and they're primed. And we've been in so many military exercises. It's not going to be World War I. It's not going to be Civil War. It's not going to be anything like we've seen before, because we finally have the tools to absolutely destroy the physical world and the psychological one. That's why it's worse than it's ever been.
That is actually something that I kind of agree with you on, that things are much scarier than I think that they've been historically speaking.
It's more dangerous. The stakes are higher than they've ever been. And in my lifetime, at least, it's never been more hard to have a civil conversation with another human being and get on the same page on humanistic principles that should be easily understood and easily relatable from one person to the next.
Yeah, we have a lot of common ground there, I feel. I have another question here from Ben G, the G of questions. If we define everyone as God, how is this meaningful distinction? A meaningful distinction?
Because at present, this is twofold. At present, Muslims and Buddhists are chopping each other's heads off in India and Pakistan because their gods are different and they can't get on the same page. At present, we value money, power, and other things, material things, over human beings. If we make this serious conceptual shift into God being every single one of us, on one level, all religious people, the highest law of the one religion will be, when you take a violent act against a human being, that's a violent act of God. Now, if you can really assimilate that into people's minds, the way people assimilate, all their particular beliefs within their religion that would make them go to hell or whatever, but you make the divine principle, we are God. So any whatever you do to a human being, think of it as you're doing it to your God, and what consequences would be at play if you did that. Same thing goes for valuing everything above people. If you dump toxic waste to save money and poison a water source for human beings, that's a violation against God, right? And so putting the human being as the most divine principle, and of course animals and the planet itself, because that ecosystem is delicate, but seeing all those things as divinity itself and bringing the respect for people back to that highest form, to the primary thing.
I got another question here. I think we can do two more. One from Dragons in Genesis. Were you aware that scientific method has been applied to Jesus and we found no convincing evidence of Jesus's existence as a historic figure?
Yeah, so I've got no qualms with that. I don't know if Jesus actually existed. I think that there was a person that existed that exemplified these ideas of Dionysus, Christ, Hermes Trismegistus, Buddha. I think there was a person. But I don't know for sure. But I've said this before to a lot of people. Whether or not Jesus physically existed as a human being on the planet is almost inconsequential 2,000 years later. What's important is what he left behind in his words, and this idea that we can transcend our normal human nature. And so whether or not what we can prove Jesus lived is absolutely inconsequential to anything I've said.
Sure. And I got one from GeoSam here. How do you reconcile the existence of evil and suffering with an omniscient God, unbenevolent and omniscient God?
Yeah, so this is where I break up my Luciferian beliefs. Evil is conceptual. It's not real. It's real in the framework of being in a human species. So for instance, here's a great example. A meteor crashes into the planet, kills 3 billion people. Is the meteor evil? Do we witness it as an evil act? Absolutely not. We witness it as a natural act. If a person becomes a serial killer and kills 1 billion people, this is the most evil act ever done in human history. We deem it evil because it comes out of the human psychology, but that's because we don't understand that human beings are a force of nature, not that much different than hurricanes, right? Like we are a force of nature, and we are at the mercy of all the karma that's ever happened in the universe. And so evil is, well, first we have to reframe what evil is, because evil isn't something that exists externally and influences us necessarily. Now there's things that happen to us and things we do to each other that we deem evil, and it has a purpose in the fact that we say, this is the thing that's not okay to do. And that's important for a stable society, but there's nothing intrinsically evil about it. It's just a word we use to say that's a no-no.
Or the no square.
The no square, exactly. And another thing too is people don't understand. I don't know why I understand why people do it, but it's incorrect to assume that an omnipresent, omnipotent God has favor to human beings, one, and that won't allow for tragedy to occur in the world. If everything was bubblegums and flying kites, it'd be a really boring place to live. It's through suffering, it's through adversity, and it's through the entanglement of the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the hardships and the joy, which makes this experience worth it. It'd be boring as hell if there was no evil in the world, or whatever we call evil. That's another thing we have to understand. Omnipresence isn't weighted one side or the other. Omnipresence is all things that occur.
Wouldn't you rather live in a world where like someone like Martin Luther King didn't have to suffer to get to the place where we were at, though? You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't that be a better world to live in?
Well, that's an isolated incident. Well, yeah, of course I would. Of course I would have loved to see Martin Luther King finish out what he was trying to do. But that's not saying that evil or struggle is completely out of the conversation. That would be one struggle we wish didn't end the way it did, right? Or even so, here's another thing. If he didn't die, he would have continued to struggle, but maybe he would have got farther in it. But him dying and there being negative consequences doesn't justify that there shouldn't be any struggle in the world. Just that we would have really liked that the struggle didn't end. The struggle wasn't so severe that it ended his life.
So I got a question. Do you think that there's any suffering or evil in heaven or in the afterlife?
I don't necessarily affirm that there's any sort of static heaven or afterlife either. I think the only thing we should be concerning ourselves with is building heaven on earth. I think that heaven, hell, and earth realm, whatever you want to call it, are all three dimensions, psychological mostly, but I think we manifest them in material reality. I think they all exist in the same place. And so these what's called death cults. So the Abrahamic religions, religious historians refer to Abrahamic religions as death cults. It's not meant to be mean. It's a cult, which is also a legit term. It's an organization with mythologies, rituals, and beliefs. And that's
they're apocalyptic.
Yeah, and so even more so, they concern themselves with the consequences of death. And so how, like, you know what I mean, transitionary. I'm blowing that with the wind. That's not
destruction.
Important. Yeah.
Or they're obsessed with destruction.
Yes.
Not obsessed with fixing the problems now because this isn't the world we live in.
Precisely. And that's the conceptual shift we have to make, is that we have to concern ourselves with building heaven on earth in the present, not being good little boys and girls, so that maybe we go to a place that we can't even imagine to be real. I'm not a proponent of there being a static heaven. I'm a proponent of maybe something happening after we die, but I don't know, and I don't claim to know, and I think it's silly for anybody to say so, because there's absolutely no way to prove that.
Agreed. As far as I'm concerned.
Very atheistic of me, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. And I think it's interesting you say that, because I wonder why it's not the same with the claims you make about all people being God. Because how could we honestly know that?
Well, because like I said, I'm making a conceptual shift on the definition of God. And so it's different. It's like, what's that movie they do it in? It's in Star Trek where one of the characters, guy that Simon Pegg plays in the new one, he realizes that the reason he couldn't figure out the warp speed algorithm was because he was thinking that they were moving through space, not that space was moving through them. And so this is the concept. This is the great analogy for what I'm doing. I didn't shift myself into a belief in God. I shifted what God was into something I already believed.
Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have for the Q&A section. Mike and Oz, you guys want to take it away?
Yeah, man, you can do that. Oz, take it away.
Well, that's what. Well, that's the end of Q&A. And normally we have a nice little segment break there, but we'll bring Costa in.
Everybody's just passing it to the next person.
No, you guys, we appreciate the questions in the comments. So thank you. Any viewers that drop more questions, and we'll try and get them on. But we're going to go back into the epistemic questions for Mark. He's been a champ chatting with Oz and Mike. But we'll leave Jeff, the troll, up, and Murder Shed Steve.
Can I just ask one question to Murder Shed Steve?
Yeah, go ahead, bud.
Do you do carpentry? Because I see you with the axe and I see you with the chainsaw, and I'm just wondering what you use those tools for. I see Murder Shed, and I just want to make sure.
Well, things aren't always as they seem.
Yeah.
No, he will murder you until
Mark, he will literally kill you. Just stop. I'm telling you.
Are you familiar with
it's not worth it, man.
Are you familiar with the Venus flytrap?
Yes. So it's like a metaphor. If I get too close, I'm done for.
Not the Kama Sutra position, Mark.
I'm into that too, but
yes, but he literally will murder you until you're dead.
Yeah, you know how they say there's no atheist in foxholes. There are no marks in Murder Shed
Steve's garage.
Yes, they're just chopped up into bits. So just letting you know.
We find out like 10 years from now that you guys are serious about this. Like,
I'm still working towards.
We've made it pretty clear we're not joking.
He's the only one. He's the only one who didn't show up to Georgia when we all met. So I'm just throwing it out there. So.
Oh yeah. Probably a lot of the wanted posters, huh?
Yeah.
Well, hey, I got a fair question. This is a question because I saw it kind of sarcastically put in the comments. I'll start it off and then I'll get out of here. So, Mark, from an agnostic point, my view on a deity would be that of something special, something fantastic, something better than myself, I would assume. Either whether it could be something ferocious or horrific,
like
or something phenomenal. Yeah. Well, he's cool. Look, he's got. Look at his little noodly arms.
I was gonna say he's noodly.
Right, but let's take a natural disaster for example. You know, the deistic god gods could cause a tidal wave just as much as it could cause the beauty in the world that you see, right? But if it's the type of gods that you've brought up thus far, why is it that you smoke cigarettes?
Because I'm addicted. And this is another interesting question because I've gotten a lot of these types of things. Like people say, well, if you're the second coming, why do you wear glasses? Right. I was like, well, for instance, I guess a good example from, remember, we're dealing with linguistics, right? And like that one person just said, you can't prove Jesus existed physically. So even if we're to reference these things like Jesus was perfect and, you know, he would have had perfect eyesight and he wouldn't have smoked. These are still just imaginings of what we think it should be. And so I don't think this has any sort of effect on what I'm talking about, because what I'm talking about is reforming society and changing the way we understand magic. And I can do all that while smoking a cigarette.
Yep. Well, that question was for the Christians, not for me. I appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah.
Over to you guys. Austin.
So it's good to have everybody on screen. And again, Mark, thanks for going through Jesus, Mike, and my questions, and then the Q&A with all of our awesome rock star viewers. And I guess where I'll kick it off, Mark, after listening to the video several times and now listening tonight, I'm just going to be brutally honest now here at the end. Have you created your own God?
I don't think so, because I don't think there's anything in conflict with what I believe in from the alchemical God, for instance. And there's lots of similarities to the God I'm talking about and the original Buddhist God and the God of Zoroastrianism. So I don't think I've created a new God. What I think I've done what I'm trying to do is take all of those important things that were very true about what we should truly view God as conceptually, psychologically, and I'm bringing them back to the present and relating them to things that they haven't been able to relate to, like science.
Well, and that's what I mean. I feel like you're taking what you would view, I guess, the best of each God, or the best characteristic of each God, and now we're creating this ultimate God, and what you called as a one religion, or a religion of one, or whatever. I feel like you're taking all of those pieces that you feel meet or match that requirement that you have, created or defined within yourself, and now you've built that. So please walk me through that and help me understand why I'm wrong.
No, Oz, you're right. For the most part, I'll lay all that out. That makes me very happy that you just said that, because that's the point. God is a linguistic, psychological power within us, and the problem we've had with religions is that we built up a corrupt character. I'm not trying to take all the good parts. I'm trying to take all the pragmatic parts, because I think all the bad parts, or the things that don't work, are actually in contradiction to into healthy, normal state psychology of human beings. And so for me, they are faulty aspects of God. Remember, we're doing this conceptual shift. God, most importantly, is a program within our brains. And I think it's important to continue to call it God, right? But then reclaim what God actually is. And what God actually is our aspirations for the highest version of ourselves. And so that's my pragmatic analysis when I go through all the books. What I'm doing is I'm sifting through all the bullshit, and I'm throwing the bathwater out, but I'm keeping the baby. And I think I'm able to do that. And that's what makes me the second coming, because I have the ability and the courage to do it and to say it out loud.
Okay. So then,
well, I got to
just
follow
real quick, because I think this is directly related to that. So Mark, in that, then can I do the same as you and still be correct, even though I'm taking my favorite parts of those gods and applying my own favorite parts? Can I create my own God and still be in line with what you're saying?
Well, it depends on if they end up being in line. And so we have to be very careful with the words we use. You used good and you used favorite. I used pragmatic. And this is extremely important distinction. I'm using pragmatic objectively, not what's good for me, what's good for everyone, right? That's what I'm building. You can build your favorite God. That's what everyone's been doing for the last 2,000 years. It doesn't work.
But what prevents him using that language when you say, I use language this very specific way? How come all of a sudden it specifically works, but it doesn't when I'm making the point about magic?
So I don't understand the question.
Well, you're saying I'm using language in a very specific way, and I'm saying, well, we use language in a specific way, and magic is not what you were defining it as. At least that wouldn't be the understood way. I mean, we could use it any way we want, I suppose, but I don't see how there'd be a difference in him using good as opposed to you using like pragmatic or whatever you would use, because couldn't he just define his word as good as pragmatic or magic or whatever? Because it seems like you've loosened the grip on linguistics so much that he could just do that, right?
What you just did was loosen the grip, and here's how. There's a very big difference between the word pragmatic, between the word favorite, and between the word good. Remember, I told you, I'm making a conceptual shift to what we see magic as. Magic is language. That doesn't make it blurry. That makes it more precise. And on top of that, the precision of the use of the words. If you build a good God or a favorite God, that God could chop off the heads of all the people you don't like. That's not a pragmatic God. That's not an objectively pragmatic God that serves all human beings. And that's why it's very important for us to be precise with those words. So there is a big distinction, and you muddy the waters if you don't use the correct word.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying with magic. Sorry, Oz, you go ahead though. Yeah.
So that's where I'm going back to it with the God thing. So then if words are powerful, and we're talking about words being the magic or the impacts we're making. So just simply using the word God and going back to definition, God being defined as a being perfect in power, wisdom, and goodness, who is worshipped, as creator and ruler of the universe. Well, guess what? I don't know anybody on this current feed right now that are those things all encompassing, and that's the definition of God. So now we're even taking the word God and applying our own definition to the word. So are we manipulating and creating our own God to fit our own claim? Or are we going by what is accepted as definition in our real world?
Well, for one, I don't accept most definitions of God because they're wrong.
Okay, so
Right,
that's our first problem then.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It's wrong. If anybody gets killed as a result of it, if anyone gets imprisoned as a result of it, it's not God, period. If a Christian God, like in the Spanish Inquisition, the things they did, or the Crusades on either side, Islam or Christianity, if they at any point thought that they were doing God's work, they've got the wrong fucking God, right? It's like, that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we need to rebuild a God, the true one God. And what that means, because I said the human consciousness and God are intrinsically intertwined, like completely. So what we need to do is reclaim God, because originally I think that we knew what God was because it's an intrinsic understanding. The definition that you just read is just a definition of some human being made. So I'm not doing anything different by creating my own definition.
But Mark, you and I know this, and you know, you're a very smart guy, and we know that people's perception, that's their reality. What they perceive is their reality. Yeah. And when they hear the word God and they look at a dictionary or whatever, that's the definition, that's their perception. So when you say those things, that's how they perceive it. Just like being point blank, you know, there are some people that you may be trying to communicate to, whether it was last week or tonight, and claiming second coming of Christ, Buddha and all this, and you're on here, and forget the cigarette. I don't even care about the cigarettes because I smoke. But talking about language, it's fuck and shit and damn and all that. Guess what? Perception is reality. And language, if you truly think language is magic, guess what you did to the people because of their perception and how you affected their reality simply by you just using those words, using that language. So how do you ground that? Because that is polar opposite to what most people are conditioned to in their perception of you and reality.
I completely agree. And how do I do it? I keep saying fuck, shit, damn, because it's an illusion to think that those words are bad.
I agree with that part. Fuck, shit, damn. I agree, but you're trying to reach people a different way than I am. So
yeah, well, so here's the thing. Some of what I do is going to be very uncomfortable. And in fact, it has been. It's been very uncomfortable for me, and it's been uncomfortable for 90% of the people that have followed me at some particular points. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to appease people and their beliefs. I'm here to massively shift our understanding of God and get people to realize what's important. It's not important whether or not we swear. It's important how we swear. Just like it's important how we use words that are non-swear words. It's not about saying fuck. If I hit my knee on the wall running through the house and I say fuck, there's absolutely that is a neutral. There's no one getting hurt by me doing that, right?
Well, you just demonetized us. No, I'm just kidding.
Did I? Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. I thought it was legit on YouTube. I didn't know.
Stop
me if I get out of control.
You're okay. You're okay. It's
okay. Good.
Yeah.
But if I say you're a fucking asshole and I'm mean about it and I got intent in it, well, then it's a crime. You know what I mean? Unless the person's actually being one. If I use language in any way, no matter what words I use, and I use it with the intent to hurt, with murder in my heart, then we're talking about something that's pragmatically evil, right? Pragmatically disruptive to human psychology and can cause people to feel bad. And we can measure that. There's an empirical way to measure what we might deem as evil. We can blood test somebody, see if they produced a bunch of cortisol and adrenaline. We can watch when people say certain things, like if you have a tyrannical boss and over time, the employees become unproductive and they become like they don't get any sleep at night or they become suicidal. This is what we should be respecting as deity. Let me plug in real quick, guys. I'm about to lose power. Sorry.
You're good.
You're good.
So
why?
Sorry, good.
So why he does that and I'll shift. I know you.
Zoom in on the couch.
I know Steve wanted to jump in. I'm sorry, Steve. I wanted to follow up on that question because I had notes on there. But for the viewers, this is like we said, this is This is Mark's second time on, and the first time we kind of skimmed through a lot of this. So we want to make sure we really dig into Mark's, his worldview, religious view, his story, and that's what we're doing. So some of the questions are going to get, intense, and I'm sure he'll have some pushback and some questions for us. Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. Steve, I know you had a question or two there. Go ahead, man.
Oh, you kind of already fielded it, but I guess my question was basically why, knowing that we know what we know about all the baggage that comes with the term God, the word God, no matter what it was originally, no matter what the original intent of the word was, there's lots of words that have morphed through time like that and gained more negative connotations. I could start saying them, but obviously I don't want to necessarily put a poor taste in anybody's mouth. But so just knowing what we know of the current definition of God, why not just call it what it's known as for the most part, which would essentially just be secular humanism?
Well, secular humanism is a philosophy or ideology. God is a deity. And it's a psychological object. It's a mean, it's the smallest unit of an idea, where secular humanism would be an ideology. And so, but secular, now I'm not going to try to define it. Is secular belief? Is it an atheist term?
No, it essentially means anything outside of religion, anything that exists outside of essentially what is religion.
Can you have the concept of God in secular humanism?
No.
Then I would say no, because I think it's important to retain that thing, because it's more important than just a word. God is representative of a very complex and powerful idea about the aspiration for the greatest version of yourself, and that there are consequences for our bad behavior.
Couldn't you just call that being your best self, your most humanist self?
Well, yeah, it's a bit longer. It's a bit longer, isn't it? But it doesn't tell the story. It doesn't tell the story either. You're being your best self because you witness the interconnectedness between all human beings, and there's a divine spark in all of us that we should respect. You know what I mean? Like God is a very complex word that unfolds into many things. Now we can go around. We can maybe shift it to call it Shabuba if we want, if everyone gets on board. But it's probably easier to just call it God in English and Allah in Arabic, and just keep those individual words and take all the nonsense off and make it pure again, and then put new pragmatic layers for a new world. I'm totally, in many ways, a secular humanist, where I divide is just that I think the concept of God and the presence of God is real and important.
So knowing that, or saying that we are God, right? Essentially, right? And just knowing the kind of baggage that would come with that term. Are you saying that we are creators of the universe? Or are you saying that we are creators of reality in any way? Or is that not a part of your definition of God?
So the entirety of God is like the light that shines through a diamond. And human beings are the individual fractal pieces of light that come off of it, that create human beings in all things, rocks, whales, oceans, conversations, which fractal out to what's called the myriad of things. And so I, Mark, am not the creator of the universe, but I am an aspect of creation in the universe. Does that make sense?
So essentially,
that would be
my definition of that would be either the human race or the universe. That would be my term for essentially what you're saying. We're all part of a bigger thing, collectively.
Yeah, and that's a piece of it. But like I said, I think that there's more important layers that we need to examine and exemplify. That's the view, or that's like maybe the mythology of God, is that God is us, God is the universe, it's interrelated, interconnected. But then there are principles, like the desire to be the best version of yourself. And that breaks down into, well, what does that mean? Well, how do we define what the best things are? Well, those things which are pragmatic to our existence, which is the good treatment of people, the entire ecosystem and the planet, right? So you see what I'm saying? Like it cascades out. You can't just, so that's another thing too, is like back in the day, all the religions, back in the day, they used to not give a name to God because God's nameless. Because in order to speak the name of God, you'd have to speak the entire universe and every single corner of it for the entirety of time. And so they understood that back in the day. And that's why the name of God was sacred and was not spoken. And so that's the kind of same thing we're dealing with here. God is probably the most dense word ever. And so it's not enough to just try to come up with a sentence or a word to replace it. The word itself works fine. There's nothing corrupted or baggage about it. It's our perceptions of the word that need to shift. So there is no baggage. The baggage is inside of our heads.
Well, there is an issue with the argument, and that is like, and I would be curious on how you would, if someone said that you committed a fallacy of composition. Are you familiar with what that is?
No, could you define it for me?
Yeah, so it's basically when you're going to infer that something is true, and then take part of that and extrapolate it to the whole, in a sense, right? So you basically said that we are, part of that God, part of that whole. How would you justify that not being a fallacy of composition?
I still don't understand the question.
So you're saying that because something is the part, therefore, you're saying we are part of the whole, right?
Uh-huh.
We're part of the whole of God, right?
Yeah.
And you're inferring either God exists and we are part of that, or you are inferring that we exist, we are part of God. How are you avoiding a composition division fallacy? Because you can't just state one thing that is small automatically, or I'm sorry, that is a part, is in relevance to the truth of the whole, or vice versa.
Well, I absolutely can. And I think what's happening is you're misunderstanding. If I'm eating a bowl of cereal, okay, if I take one Fruit Loop out of the bowl of cereal, that Fruit Loop came from the bowl of cereal. And inside of that bowl, it's one part of the bowl of cereal, because the bowl of cereal is a complex object.
Well, no,
it's the same thing.
I mean, yes, in a sense, but you're talking about if we're going, especially in regression terms, because we're talking about God, we wouldn't say it came from the box, or that we would actually say it came from the factory, and it wouldn't even have come from the factory. It would have come from the components that made it. So,
well, no, you've already added too many elements. I just made I used the bowl of cereal as an analogy to the universe. So now you're talking about things that are outside the universe, and we haven't had any conversation about things outside the universe, because I don't know anything that's going on outside of the universe.
So then it would be a composition division fallacy. We don't know, and you're inferring.
No, I think you're still misunderstanding. I made the bowl of cereal, the entire universe, as an analogy. Inside the bowl of cereal, remember, we're talking about linguistics here. We're talking about psychology here. Mm-hmm. One Fruit Loop in the bowl of cereal is an aspect of the bowl of cereal. It's not the entire bowl of cereal. It's just one. It's like a drop in the ocean of the bowl of cereal.
Yeah, I understand that. Drop of water makes up the entire ocean. I got it. But the thing is the problem that I'm having is that I'm not seeing how you can determine the whole when we only have the part, and you're inferring that the whole is also God. That's where the fallacy. That's where it's a fallacious argument.
No, it isn't.
We don't have any empirical data to suggest that the whole even is a thing.
No, it isn't at all.
Linguistics. It's just definition.
The universe and God, to me, are the same thing. Do you understand or no?
Well, I would understand that if they're literally the exact same thing, now that's just a violation of the law of identity.
No, it's not.
If you're saying metaphorically, then I guess, but I could just say I'm metaphorically Oz.
No,
that doesn't actually mean anything.
No, like God and universe are the same thing. It's kind of like I told you before, the Big Bang and the phrase the word became flesh are the same. Is God
a conscious being? Is God a conscious being?
God is a conscious being because we are conscious. So
is the universe him, or is he apart from the universe?
The universe has become conscious through conscious beings. Before there was conscious beings, the universe wasn't conscious. But we also have to remember something. Human beings aren't the only things that are conscious.
Then God didn't create us, because we would have to had to have existed.
It's like a 2-in-1 body conditioner.
Hey, Mark.
Exactly.
I'm just curious. I'm not
Mark,
understanding.
Hey, Mark. How did you come to find that out to be true?
To me, it's just so extremely obvious, because if you look at all the different religions and gods, the reoccurring factor is that the evidence of God is nature itself, right? We don't know what happens outside the universe, so we can't talk about a creator that's casting a spell and waving its hand over the universe. The only thing they've ever connected to the universe or to God is that it's nature itself. To me, it's like the God and what scientists call universe is the same thing as what religious people call God. There's no distinction. It's the same thing. It's like Allah to God. Like the language of Arabic is Allah. The language of English is God. The language of science is the universe. It's the same exact thing. We're just using different languages to talk about it.
Now, that would be my description of how man would equate things to how over the years we've come to, it's like the God of the gaps. We kind of equate, that's loud noises in the sky, that's a god or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, how did you come to terms with that being your truth?
How did I come to terms with it? In what way? Emotionally, psychologically?
No, just like how did that become knowledge to you? Because like for me, I can appreciate what you're saying because it sounds to me like that's your version of maybe Mike saying the universe. You're saying God to me is the universe to you. So how do you differentiate between the two? So how are you saying, I know for certainty that my version is correct? So how do you know that's true?
Remember, this is linguistic. God is a linguistic concept. And so when I say God, all I've done is I'm using the universe is just, like I said, the same word. The only difference between God and the universe is that it's not mute. And although we can't, the universe, when you see it, is just the universe, is just this thing with like the 4 forces of nature and your 17 subatomic particles, and you test it with science, and there's no real majesticness to it, and there's no respect for its potential consciousness. And I think that's another reason why we have things like animal testing in science, because there's a disconnect between that being a violation of nature, right? And so and that's why I think it's still important to have the word God, is because it adds a layer of consciousness. It adds a layer of conscientiousness. It adds a layer of morality to it. It's the only difference. It's the universe. Sure. It's the universe with a code of ethics that we defend, because we're the most conscious beings. So we're almost responsible for carrying out righteous deed, right, and being righteous in our lives.
That's a great, for an agnostic like me, that's a great explanation. How do you get me to that point? So I'm agnostic, and I say, thank you for your explanation. How do you get me from agnosticism to Gnosticism without faith?
Well, because you don't have to have faith in order to do it. All you have to do is now. So, for instance, you're an agnostic, and you're a very smart guy, and so there's a meta level to this. It's not diving into the inside of God and then being at the mercy of it. It's taking God as a horse and riding it, right? It's like you're in control of the language you create. So I'm asking you, you don't have to call it God. What I'm trying to do is get people to get back on board with God and the principal ideas of God actually having some value. And I guess I'll use one example of that, why that's important. Late 1800s, early 1900s, Nietzsche said, God is dead. And Nietzsche is often quoted just as this first part of what the actual quote was. And some people misinterpret him as actually celebrating it. He wasn't. He was exclaiming it in terror, because the next sentence he said was, and we don't have enough water to wash the blood off of our hands. Nietzsche went on to predict he said that political structures would collapse in such a way that we'd see hundreds of millions of deaths. And he just happened to be spot on. And Nietzsche believed at that point that the reason that all this would occur with things like communism, socialism, which is a godless politics, because there was no concept of God, there was no respect for human life. And therefore, the justifications of communism in large part was because there was an absence of God, as God represents a psychological concept of doing the right thing. Does that make sense?
Your explanation makes sense. Like, you've made it make sense to me. You haven't made me believe in a God. So that's what I'm trying to get to the point to where you are, in a sense, right? So when I'm asked the question, do I believe in a God or gods? I don't currently accept the claims of gods. I think that they're very, very juvenile in the sense, the books that are written about them. I think it's fair to say most of the mythological claims of the ancient Greek gods are all, at best laughable. I mean, they're good stories. But then you get down to the monotheistic current, your Judeo-Christian gods and things. At best, I would find it illogical. And then you have to play into the faith. It always boils down to faith. So if I take away faith, how am I to side on you? How am I coming over to you from an agnostic position? I want to believe what you're saying. So how do I get your knowledge?
So one thing is this belief system that I'm trying to build out, that I'm trying to architecture, doesn't require you to have faith in a God. It only requires you to understand that everything I'm saying is for the purposes of pragmatic good for the world in regards to human beings and the entire all the aspects of nature, which are like, you know, the hammock of our existence. So I pick up this cup and I'm like, this is God. I look at myself in the mirror and say, I am God. Like the universe, like I said, the universe and God, they're the same thing. And so there doesn't need to be a shift in faith or belief. It needs to be a shift in the way we define God. It's just it's a linguistic definitionary thing. Like you can go on calling it the universe still. What I think is missing from society is that we've made it mute, and we've made of no consequence our actions. If we just view the universe as a mute thing and there's no consequence to our actions ultimately, then we have no there's no value in doing the right thing. What I think we've lost in our society is that a respect for the fact that there is a right thing to do, and there's a right way to conduct yourself with people. Lying is wrong, hurting people physically is wrong, hurting people psychologically is wrong, having intention to hurt people is wrong. Those principles need to be like the pillars, right? If you're going to call it the universe, that's fine, as long as it activates those four things. My justification for that isn't because I'm trying to build a God that I want. I'm trying to recreate our ideology on God so that it's absolutely pragmatic and productive and progressive for the human experience in this reality.
You know, I was actually checking boxes as you were going along, and I agree wholeheartedly with the outlook. I just can't posit a supernatural deity into that. So I'm with you, like, you know, checkbox.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the use of the term of God a justification for objective morality for you? Like that morality has to come from somewhere?
Well, obviously it does, because look where we're at. It has to come from somewhere. It's not enough to just let people be. Like, and that's not like a controlling aspect. It's not like regulation of our psychology. It's a deeper understanding that what we do and what we say to each other counts. And the way we can prove it counts is because when we do evil, we can eat, like I said, evil is kind of an illusionary thing, but we can define that there's certain things you shouldn't do to people. And it's not just in that moment that we can say, oh, that's bad. We can see empirically how things that we all deem bad have long-term effects on society. Greed and capitalism has caused a massive space between human beings on this planet, where we used to have a 6-to-1 ratio from CEO to lowest employee. We now have, in some instances, 300-to-1. That's greed. That's evil. It's actually caused pain. It's led to death. It's led to poverty. Like that's what I'm trying to get at. And obviously, it's not. We don't have enough programs in our society to prevent it, and there's not enough government regulation on the planet, and there's not enough papers to write on those regulations for it to be regulated and policed. We need something higher. We need a higher psychological concept that unites all human beings on this planet, regardless of their race, religion, political affiliation, etc.
So I suppose my question in there is, just knowing that what we can do is look at history and look at the effects of things and understand how they affect other people and all that kind of stuff, and that we can come up with morality based on that. Why is a God necessary for that at all?
Because the God hyperlinks all those things together. It's just a piece of language that we use to hyperlink all those things, because right now they're this way and that. We've got all the research is in. We have all the information now at our disposal to be able to say this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is good, right? But we have a lot of outlying characters that will still commit those evils.
Okay.
The issue is that you have to understand language and ideologies as programming in the brain. We need to reprogram our brains so that the things that are actually important are important again.
What about people with neurological disorders who cannot do that? Doesn't that mean we're just doomed? We'll never have that universal thing because we just have millions of people that are never going to have the neural correlates or or I'm sorry, the ability within the neural correlates or anything to be able to manifest what you're saying.
Well, give me an example. Are we talking about MR or are we talking about narcissistic personality disorder?
Talk about anything. You talk about physical trauma to the brain. It could be a lot of different things.
Well, there's a distinction. If it's MR, the person doesn't have their own volition to make the choice. If they're
whatever would constitute in your worldview that.
Well, there's two. It depends. So that's what I'll explain it. If it's MR, they don't have the volition to make the choice, and so we just care for them the same way we're caring for them now. If it's someone with narcissistic personality disorder who has potentially become a rogue and doesn't have any conscience because of trauma, we undo the trauma through using psychological concepts like cognitive behavioral theory or whatever. But so we have to work them back to a state in which they can accept that and actually stand for it on the day-to-day behavior. Same
what
thing
if
with
it's
MR.
physical? What if it's physical though, in the sense of that it still is going to inhibit that same process of the brain that you would utilize to reach the levels that you're saying, and there's a physical reason why that person can't, that you cannot just fix by communication or even medicine.
Well, give me an example. Like, are we talking about MR? Are we talking about the part of their brain that we imagine as God is missing for some reason? Like,
yeah, because I don't. Well, it's hard for me to give a specific example because I don't believe that the part in the brain that you're talking about is really a thing that is manifested within a God. I don't see that to be true at all. But so I wouldn't know.
I was just using it as an example. What I'm
saying is I don't know what
you got to be more precise. You can't just say like it's very ambiguous what you're saying. You got to be more precise so I can give you an actual answer.
Well, I got you, but you got to understand from my perspective that since I don't fully understand how your worldview of the brain works in that regard, I'm not going to know exactly specifically what would even be the thing that's going to affect that. So I'm asking you, is there a case where, are we all going to have that ability despite potential physical deformities or somebody having trauma or they're being born like that? I don't know what specifically it would be, but it inhibits their ability to get to where you're at is all I'm asking.
Every single mental condition is going to have a different answer. If it's narcissism, we have to work with trauma and we have to help them get back to normal. If it's MR and if they can't even function in society, they go into a home. It's inconsequential to the grander scheme of things of society. Every single mental condition is going to have a different answer. On top of that, as we go into the future, we're going to discover ways to take people out of MR is mental retardation, by the way. I just want to make sure everyone knows.
Yeah, I was thinking that's what it was, but I was like, I'm not sure what you mean by MR. But
yeah, so I just wanted to be more respectful. It's a technical term, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
So with MR, for instance, it's inconsequential whether or not they can assimilate it because we're taking care of them. We're putting them in a home. We're giving them the resources they need. It's inconsequential if that person can grasp that. It doesn't affect the whole philosophy of society. Mm-hmm. Like MR, people with MR today can't accept anything in philosophy and politics if it's severe, right? Like they don't understand democracy, and democracy isn't not working because people with MR don't understand it and can't embrace it.
So that would answer my question. It doesn't take even a certain threshold or amount, but
absolutely it takes a threshold.
Okay, so it would take a threshold. How would you determine that? How would you get to knowing what that would be?
The same way we determine any ideology takes a threshold. There's really great research with that too. You know about adoption rate of ideologies, adoption rate of product and services, and like business and stuff. You need X amount of people before it takes off. And there's actual specific percentages. So we just
but like a herd immunization, for example. Like, do we have something like that? That would be.
We have 10,000 years of history and research, which shows us how any other ideology took off and held weight. Like there's the amount of evidence to prove that is there's more than enough. The problem isn't that we don't know how to do it. The problem is we'd have a lot to sift through.
Sure.
It's an ideology just like Zoroastrianism or Luciferianism or conservatism. Like it just has different belief system, but it's in the spectrum.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, my last question on that, or at least for the whole thing for me, would be, I tried to ask at the beginning, but maybe I'll try to ask it like a different way, because using falsify probably might be a little too scientific and like specific on what we would have to do, but like for you, what would it take for you to go, yep, this isn't true, everything I said is not true? Like what would happen? What would have to happen?
You'd have to be able to prove everything wrong in psychoanalysis. You'd have to prove everything wrong with what we know about biology and how people produce cortisol and adrenaline when they're under stress and people say like negative things to them, or they have anxiety and depression. This is also weighted and intrinsically tied to real science. You would have to disrupt and destroy everything you stand on in order for me to stop believing what I believe.
Could not just be what I mentioned earlier about the underdetermination principle, where you perhaps are looking at the evidence and you've come up with a theory, but it's actually rivaled by a theory that's actually that's true. Because we probably agree that we can have theories that seem to be true until we falsify them, right? So when how would the other science be relevant to your claims?
We covered that pretty extensively in the beginning of the debate, but I'll say it again. When you say mean things to people, they produce adrenaline and cortisol. If you continue to do that and commit psychological and physical abuse to people, they will develop physiological symptoms. Mm-hmm. That's one principal idea of what I believe in with my religion, or whatever you want to call it, is that we have to be very careful and precise with every word we speak and every action we take, because the science shows us that if we commit to actions that are not pragmatic and productive for people, that are maladaptive, it messes them up long term.
So I would agree with that. I just don't see how you go from like me and you agreeing with God, or like all this other stuff is, I guess, where I just get super lost, because I'm like, I agree with a lot of the stuff you say. I feel like you're taking I feel like you're a naturalist that's adding something to it, like an ad hoc kind of thing to it. And I'm not trying to like accuse you of it. I'm just trying to figure out like what justifies that.
Could you explain that in simpler terms, that I'm a natural, the ad hoc part?
I feel like you're just adding something to it that is already explained by the empirical data, and then you're just kind of, well, it could be this, and by definition would just be adding to the theory that has no empirical basis to. But if Steve, you want to word it in a better way,
maybe I guess I might have been going in a slightly different direction, but to me, based on everything that I've heard tonight and all the questions that we've asked and all that kind of stuff, it seems like we're just on the same page. We just have different definitions. That's
exactly what's happening here.
That's exactly what's happening. And
we're using different words.
And the only pushback that I have, and I know we've already kind of covered this, but the only pushback that I have to you really is that the definition, or the words that you're using, or the definitions that you're using, carry and when I say carry a lot of baggage, I mean that there's so many presuppositional thoughts that people have about those terms that trigger so many things for so many different people that it stops discourse. When if we could come to a definition that we all agree to, we'll find out that we all agree to the same thing.
Yes, and that's why
I don't feel like God is a good term to use, only because it already has so many different definitions that we would have to suss through. When we could just shift to something and just call everything what it is, and that's kind of like a pretty standard atheistic standpoint, from my understanding.
Yeah, and so I agree almost completely. And look, God is an English word that hasn't been around that long. The idea, though, it stands without it. Like, it's called Allah or God or Brahma. It's the principal understanding of what those words mean that's important. Like I said before, if we end up calling it Shabuba 30 years from now, but it stands for all the things that we're talking about, then that's great. But I think Shabuba should be prayed to and hailed by every single person on the planet as a conceptual thing, not an external sky daddy.
Right.
Something deeper and divine within us.
Right.
That's you completely explained exactly what's happened. Yeah. Is that we're just speaking on the definition of the word God is the only place that I haven't been able to find a way to reconcile across 8 billion people, and that's that work I'm trying to do.
Well, yeah, I think what I see you doing, or what I see you saying with this is essentially we're all trying to get to that humanist place, but you're using terminology that's comfortable for a large majority of the people on the planet. So what you want to do is create like a little cushion for them to fall off the tightrope into, that's a lot more comfortable that we can then transition into secular humanism. That's what I've been trying to say for a while now. So
yeah. So I think we'd have to have a third meeting on it, because like I agree with a lot like Mark. I think we have a very like similar thought, but you're clearly you educate yourself on a lot of things. It's not like you just pull shit out of your ass or anything. When we get into science, I've had conversations I've heard you in conversations or through videos talk about stuff that I go, yeah, I mean, what he's saying there is true. My thing is language I think is kind of the thing that I'm not as on board. I think this is where me and you split. I'm not on board with being able to, like, I think words have usage. Obviously, you can take whatever you want, you can call me agnostic or an atheist. I don't care. But I think why I'm struggling is because words do matter to a degree, and at some point it gets confusing. And I feel like at any point, it's almost too ambiguous where it allows you to kind of like slide in and out of certain things. It's like, well, I didn't actually mean this. And I'm not saying you do it. I'm saying just language can do this. And if we're not specific, like the example you gave about good versus pragmatic that Oz had said, that is a moment that you highlighted as this is important to distinguish. And I would highlight that to say that's what I'm trying to say to you about magic and all these other things, is I feel the same way that you felt about when Oz used the word good that I do with a lot of the words that you are just using in general, which is that I think it's important to actually define them in a different way. When you then when I tell you that and then you define it in a way, it's like, okay, well, I see what you're saying. I think we just disagree on how we're using the language. So otherwise we would just feel the same way. But if that makes sense to you, that's kind of how
And think about what we're talking. We're meta talking conceptually about the 10,000 years of value that words have. This isn't going to be an easy conversation, but I think if we work hard on it, we can get to that place. And so here's another thing, the slipping in and out. I have to do a lot of slipping in and out right now, because I'm trying to take Brahma, and I'm trying to take Allah, and I'm trying to take the universe, and I'm trying to take God, and I'm trying to get all these communities together to understand they're the same thing. That's going to be very chaotic and muddy at first, but through the forge of conversation, through long form conversation, we will be able to unite all those things. And I think that's extremely important.
Maybe by our 7th conversation, we'll be on.
Yeah, well, 7th the number
like,
of completion,
right? I'll be like, I'm actually on that level. No, I'm just kidding. But that'd be interesting to. I think we should have a part 3 and us talk a lot about language and
Return of the Jedi.
And maybe we just specifically talk about linguistics and how those.
Yeah,
I think then cool. A 4th conversation that we could potentially have would be like completely open to no misunderstanding at all. But I felt like we had a really good conversation there, and I appreciate you coming back on, Mark. Thanks
for having me, guys.
Sadly, we've been reintroduced by 2 big nerds that we're having a great time without. But I'll let them come on in and close out the show.
Hey, Mark,
what's up, bro?
The champ's in here.
Hey! Listen, I think I made a pretty good case for getting the judges to vote for me on this one. You might have to toss on one of them belts.
We should just take this like TikTok and like maybe we go backstage and cut up some like fuck you, fuck this, and then we just pretend to have the worst conversation of all time.
You're right, and they're like waiting for it the whole time, so they watch the whole thing. Yeah. Like, when are they gonna fight? I'll do it, bro.
I know Pasta's on here, and I want him to jump in, but I do, Mark. Before we get off, I do have one more question that I did want to ask, and why Pasta jumps in.
Can you mute Oz?
I'm going to gently remove my championship belt.
Yeah. And I still didn't get my fanny pack in the mail yet. By the way, I do want it.
The TART fanny packs they're on sale right now,
bro. But I want it for free.
They come with the free agnosticism sealed inside everyone.
I didn't even. I had to pay for my shirts, and I still haven't gotten them.
Oh man.
Hey, just before you guys get into it, I want to shout out Grumpy Old Cuss. He's the CEO of Mods, by the way. So if you see him lurking around in the comments section, be mindful, because he will probably let you get away with a lot, because he's cool as shit. Anyway, everyone that's hung around all night, we've been on for about 2 hours and 15 minutes now. Anybody that's been brought here from Mark. Anybody in Mark's TikTok, anybody from Mark's social media that's come across from Mark generating you guys? I noticed we've had a few extra subs tonight. Big shout out. Thank you so much. We're big fans of Mark. Actually, Mark and I chat quite often. So we have a lot of respect for Mark. And Mark, thank you for coming on, man. We appreciate it. And
thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I hope you have a better takeaway from this experience than you did last time.
No, it was good. You guys had me to the ropes a couple times, like digging into myself to try to understand how I saw things. And you made me work really hard, and you even helped me understand better through that conversation, which is exactly what I hoped would happen, is a deeper understanding even for myself.
Sure. And just to talk with this fella, it's a Welsh East Coast of U.S. hybrid.
I thought you were British at first.
Yeah. So the Wales 20 years and 20 years over in the U.S. is hybrid. Yeah. Anyway, Spartan Theology. How did he get in again, guys? How is he getting? Is there like a back
I don't
door?
know. I should have challenged him and then gone.
Tell him to shut up.
I actually did. I said, "Shut up, Ethan." So, it's high five. Oh,
Didn't he have his doctorate taken? He had his doctorate taken away, right? He went to.
Well, they found out you went to Fisher Price University of Christians, and they're like, no, that's not real.
And Tired Skeptic, he's always tough on me when we go in those things. He always tricks me to thinking he's like some kind of theist. He's like, hey, Pastor Mike, I'm going to get him one of these days. Tired Skeptic. No, shout out to Tired Skeptic. Who else we got? I can't see anybody else. Let me see. Well, anybody who's in the chat. Geo Sam is the man, by the way.
Geo.
I'm just glad that Mark and J Mike can shake hands, bump uglies, and leave. I don't know
if I can actually shake his hand. If that's what you're asking, we can try it here.
Well, hey, Pasta. I know Mike and Steve said they had. I do have one question that I didn't get to ask. If I can ask before we go, I know they needed to go, but I'd like to ask if I can.
I think Mark's okay with that. Mark, is that okay with you?
I'm ready.
Yeah. I think I might even answer. Can I answer it, Mark?
Yeah, sure. You take the reins on this one.
You don't mind? Okay, go ahead, Oz. I'm gonna go through me first.
I'm confused.
He was way too confident. No, I just know I just know you two had to go, and I didn't get to ask a question or two that I wanted to ask, and we're already going long, so we'll keep it going.
Make it happen.
But Mark, you made a point or alluded to earlier that our world is you correct the verbiage if it's not right, but our world is falling apart or crumbling or something along those lines. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you have followed that up with we need I guess this existence or this awareness of a god or gods to correct that problem. Is that accurate?
Well, oversimplified, and not gods, just one God. But in that fundamental, yeah. But the reason that's important is because we need to rediscover God within ourselves, which will create a respect and understanding of divinity in each human being, which we would become so fearful to violate that. The same way we become fearful to piss off God and go to hell. For a devout Christian, every human being on the planet needs to have the respect and fear of hellfire and brimstone, without the actual hellfire and brimstone, in committing any sort of evil act onto a human being. So, like, the principal idea leads to a different type of behavior, like really deeply understanding what it means to be righteous and to respect another human being as a divine being.
Okay, and then in the video you did last week, you made a statement that, and again, correct me if it's not specifically accurate, but along the lines of we need God and we need religion.
So, what video was it that I said we need God and we need religion?
That you did with Pasta.
So what's the question? I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, do you believe that we need a God and that we need a religion?
We need God in the sense that we need to understand that we are God for multiple reasons, which we've touched a couple of them, but there's other ones too. I think actually believing in God within us and us actually being God, like understanding creator and created is the same thing, is going to unlock parts of our brain physiologically, psychologically, that is going to transcend the entire human race. Religion in its traditional form, not exactly. But you have to understand something. A religion breaks down into a cult, and all cult is, like I said before, is an organization with mythologies, rituals, and beliefs, right? But like that's Google. Google is a cult in that sense because they have rules that if you break, you get fired. They have rituals, like every Friday, everyone can come in on roller skates, wherever the hell it is, right? And they have a mythology, which is their backstory, how they became a company. Like we have to break down these words and what they mean. Like a religion in the sense of Christianity, which has us all thinking has all Christians thinking for the last 2,000 years they're filthy rags and they needed somebody to be blood sacrificed in order for people to go to heaven. Absolutely not. But a system of philosophy that helps, that unifies all human beings, and we finally get past race-based separation, religious-based separation, nationalist-based separation. These things need to go, and I think we actually need an organizational belief system that can help us get us there.
Okay, so the reason I ask those things is when I look at history and I look at where we're at today and what's going on in our society, not just in the country we live in, but abroad, and I see the destruction and everything that's been done in the name of religion and God and organized religion. I do take issue with that. But I'm going to draw the line there. And the reason I bring those things up is I want you to know that I have taken the last week or so and truly dove into and studied our last time that you were on our show, the video with Pasta, the other videos I could find with you on the good old interwebs, and just researching and dissecting what it is you believe, your worldview. So I will tell you, Mark, I can tell you with all integrity, I have probably listened at this point. I've listened to you for hours and you not known it.
Thank you very much.
I've listened to hours because I wanted to be as intellectually honest in this conversation as I could be, and not just throw up a front and be this atheist who's just talking shit, right? Yeah. So at this point, and that was a long circle because I wanted to build up the foundation for this.
Yeah.
At this point, Mark, I've listened to it to nausea at this point. I'm still not convinced. So what I'm asking is what is it that convinced you, and how am I to be convinced that what you believe in is that these things exist, like that this is reality?
So I'll give you a pragmatic example. How many people can we directly relate to dying as a result of religious ideology?
Say it again.
How many people in history can you directly blame religion for killing? Do you know the number?
No.
It's roughly 3 million.
I know it's a lot, but yeah.
How many people in the last century were killed by an atheistic movement? Over 100 million.
I disagree with that, but I understand what you're saying. Go ahead.
Well, communism was one of the main things with communism is to destroy the religion, destroy the God, so that people worship the state.
I totally disagree.
You can disagree, but you're disagreeing with history. You're not disagreeing with me.
Well, no, because if you're referring to Hitler,
with in practice communism, one of the most important things is to destroy the family unit and destroy the belief in God, so that the people worship the state. In the worship of state, and in all of the countries where this was done, and collectively over 100 million people died in 100 years. The entire course of human history for religion led to about 3 million deaths. That in and of itself is not an affirmation for sure that God should be good, but to me, it's pretty obvious something's going on there. So for one, like I said, pragmatically, people who believe in God have an extra layer of morality that other people that don't believe in God don't.
Okay, so I disagree. Hold on.
I'm taking that belt tonight.
I disagree. No, I disagree with what you said.
I know you do.
wholeheartedly. But that still does not convince me that that you as a God or a God exists, which was
a messenger of God. We're all God.
Well, that's what. Well, hold on, I'm confused. So, are we gods or messengers of God?
I'm the messenger of God. That's the whole becoming thing.
But I thought we were gods.
We are.
So
I'm the messenger of God. Remember, we're talking about a conceptual shift. You guys, I think you guys are having a hard time sinking your teeth into what I'm saying God is, and that's the issue. I'm the messenger of God in the sense that I'm going to be the great redefiner of what God is and how we see it in a way that all people will accept, no matter what religion or belief system they have. God will become a principal idea that transcends these old ideas of an external sky daddy. It's so much more complex and deeper than that. And that's what I'm going to have to translate so I can get all people to reconcile their differences, to hold this one high law so that all people understand truly. We say all people are created equally, but we don't do that. Like there needs to be a real acceptance of it.
Okay, so let's rewind back to that. So I hear you.
Austin, can I push pause for a second? I got to ask Steve something. Hey, Steve, are you good to stay on for a little bit, bud?
If you want me to.
I absolutely do, but I've seen some people in the comments section saying, "Hey, why are those guys going?" So I just want to know what's going on. Who's staying on and who's not? Are you staying? Because we want you on, bud.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to keep Steve on. We're going to Oz. You and Mark can keep going on with the questions. I'm going to also bring in. We'll keep going. If you guys are, Mark, are you okay to stay for a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll swing back around and sucker punch you a few more times. But
yeah. I mean, all the best Joe Rogan podcasts last 3 hours. It should be no different for TART.
They sure do. And I'll see if I can invite Spartan Theology and Cease to Know on. They had a show earlier. I'll see if I can get them in as well. They're really cool guys. And well, but yeah, Oz and Steve, carry on for a little bit, and I'm going to be in the background here. But appreciate it, Steve. Steve, if you can hang around, man, I'd really greatly appreciate that.
Yeah.
So Mark, what it comes down to, because we, and you know this, you've talked to all of us enough to know that epistemology and quote unquote street epistemology is really where we have our grounding. And when I'm going through these questions, I'm not finding a source of truth. What I've heard tonight is I feel or I sense a certain way, or even I redefine words to match a claim. That does not equate truth for me personally. I'm not going to talk for anybody else. So how do I find any substance of truth in what you're saying? Because when we dig into epistemology, there is no there's not a source of knowledge. It's just it's still just a belief and a feeling or an emotion.
Well, that's a massive miscalculation of the conversation we just had, because, like I said, we have to.
That's why I'm asking for clarity, because I'm still not. I don't have a grounding point.
So going back, like I said, this idea of God is principally this idea that we need to really consider every day aspiring to be greater every day, but then having very specific sentences that explain what that means. One of which is having a deep respect and reverence for the power of words. And then that is weighted very easily in biology, because we know words we speak can actually have negative physiological and positive physiological effects on the human body. That's rooted deeply in science. There's tons of research, peer-reviewed research, that'll prove my point. So right off the bat, God, what does God mean? To be the highest version of yourself, understand divinities within us. Okay, next step. Okay, so that means that it's a complete violation to cause evil, as we define it, on another human being. Okay, how do we weight that in science? Well, there's empirical information that shows the way we talk to people has negative or positive physiological effects based on what we say to them.
So I feel like we just keep going around in circles talking about definitions. And this is exactly the point that me and Mike were talking about in using these loaded words to describe something. because if you use these loaded words like this, it creates all this confusion, and we have to suss through all these things when you could be using words like the universe or humanity.
You guys can. You have every right. Like, use universe if you want. I'm going to use God because that's the word I'm going to use, and that's what I like using. You guys can use universe, and we can have the same conversation.
I'm just citing the example.
Hang on. So if I'm talking to a person who's Islam and I'm saying, God is great, and he says Allahu Akbar, we're having the same conversation. It doesn't. You guys can use the word universe if you want. I'm not going to try to correct you. You know what I mean? It's like that's not important what sound the word makes. What's important is what value the word has.
Okay, so even based on your words in the definition or even definitions that you want to put to them, Mark, what I'm asking you is, I am a skeptic, and I've been studying your material and listening to you all night tonight. I want to know how can I be convinced that what you're saying is true? That's what I want to know. How do I know it's true?
The first thing we still haven't done is you have to understand the conceptual shift I've made with God, and understand that it is concept. It's not something it's not something metaphysical. It's not something etheric. And that's another big issue, is we have to break down these walls that make us, when we think God, you're still, when you say God, or when I say God, I think you're still having metaphysical and etherical attachments. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about a linguistic, conceptual perception of God, which has psychological effects on us, which gives us the illusion of etherical nature and metaphysical. Going back to my example, for instance, of communism. Now, I understand where you're disagreeing with me. I'm not saying that atheists, the movement, killed 100 million people. I'm saying the absence of God in those ideologies was most certainly a contributing factor to how they were able to apathetically murder hundreds of millions of people. With God being, and I know you guys are going to struggle with this, but here's the thing. A person without God can have a bunch of tools to help them be moral in the world. God is an incredible moral tool. And if you give that to someone on top of all the other moral tools they have, especially if we redefine what God is in the way I'm talking about it, which has nothing to do with an Abrahamic God or a Buddhist God. It's much higher than that. It's a psychological principle. If you add one more layer that makes sense to everyone, that adds more morality and more code of ethics to their behavior, you're that much less likely to commit murder, to do unrighteous acts. And now here's the thing, guys. I don't know how much you know about Friedrich Nietzsche, but that man was out of control genius. He was an intellectual super heavyweight. And when he witnessed the death of God because of the Enlightenment, not because of the Enlightenment period, but as a symptom or as an effect of the Enlightenment period of the materialist movement, when he witnessed God dying within the conversation in the Western world, he predicted very accurately the massive atrocities of the 20th century. And he labeled that as the absence of God would be the reason that it occurred. Maybe it's an absolute coincidence that he was able to predict that we'd have the biggest amount of bloodshed ever because God was missing, but he just happened to get it right.
Well, and Mark, I could, if I were on your side or whoever's side, and I just wanted to move the definitions around of words so that they were so that we couldn't land on them and have clear definitions, because that's why I said earlier, I feel like we're just picking definitions and making them you manipulating the words to fit our claim, and that's again why I'm asking you, if we're going to do that, cool. If that's what you do, we want to move those things around. I still need to know where your belief or your faith is grounded, and how do I, Oz, how do I get to the place that I am convinced and that I believe? That's what I want to know. Like you
I just gave you 3 steps that you need to take. Understand that the absence of God in communist ideology had an effect on the amount of people that were murdered in the 20th century. Understand that when you say things to people with your words, they can have a negative or positive effect, and we don't have enough respect for the power of our words. And if we had an understanding and treated each other with divinity, like a real respect that we were all God, that would actually probably help us take care of each other better. And that we have to get rid of our metaphysical and etherical characteristics of God for a little bit in order for us to understand conceptually what God means, or universe, or whatever word you want to use.
I think those communist ideology things that you're bringing up are more fascist dictatorships masquerading as communists.
When you say fascist dictatorships, can you define that in political and philosophical terms for me, and then say how that's different than, or explain how that's the same as what happened in communism in Russia, and like fascism, a great example is like Mussolini's Italy,
right,
and Hitler's Germany, and now tell me how those things are the same ideologically as Mao's communism, Stalin's communism, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, now Stalin's communism was not communism. That was a fascist dictatorship once he inherited from
You're the only person that I've ever
Lenin.
heard called a fascist dictatorship. You're the only person on the planet. Every historian.
Well, maybe I'm the only person who studied it heavy enough.
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of historians would disagree with you, because it's almost completely referred to as communist country
in America.
And I think a lot of There's a lot of reasons
why it was written that way in the history books. However, if you study what was done during that time under Stalin, I would call that fascism based on the definition.
If you study it, you'd also see that there is an ideological lineage from Marx, Trotsky, Lenin, Stalin. It's an evolution into that, and the ideology. And a major thing that happened with the Bolshevik Revolution in transition into Soviet Russia was a destruction of the church. They were literally killing priests because they had to destroy the idea of God and people, because God was an idea of morality, because it brought people together in communion of love. That was the major tactic of theirs. So whether you call it fascism or communism, that elimination of deity, that elimination of God and belief in divinity and love for each other was destroyed, because that's the only way they could have got away with killing, for instance, in Russia, 60 million people.
Okay, so the bottom line is the lack of belief in something has never killed anybody. Let's be clear.
The lack of belief.
Let's move on.
No, we're not going to move on, because you're wrong. The lack of belief that murder is bad will most certainly lead to people getting killed.
No, but you were talking about you talked about atheism.
No. But you just said no. You simplified it, and you said the lack of belief in something never led to someone getting killed. That's a silly statement.
Okay. So Mark, I will correct myself. I apologize. Okay. The belief in a God never killed anybody. So I'll correct myself. But Steve, the reason I jumped in there is at the end of the day, it comes back to substantiate a God claim or God's claim, plural, if that's where we're at. And I know we're going to bring a couple more faces and voices in here, but Mark, you're my dude, man. We're going to have our
dude. Believe me, this is all just passion. Believe me when I tell you guys.
Same here.
Zero negativity. Absolutely, guys. We're good. We're good.
Austin got that body like Alba.
And I get like Thrasmachus from the Republic. I love
Mark. Mark, I look forward to more conversations. And I do. I want to get to the point where you can have something that convinces me that maybe I think this is real. And that's what I'm digging for. I spent hours doing it. But let's get a couple other new voices and faces in here. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Hold on. All right. So, hey guys, I'm going to put Austin and Steve backstage for a moment. Just for a moment. They're hanging out. They're just going to go backstage for a moment. Hey, what's going on, Mark?
Hey, what's happening, bro?
I got a little surprise for you, because I've actually got a Christian, and he's actually a good friend of mine. He's even educated me on like a term called agnostic theism, which is really cool. I think it's cool. He's one of my favorite dudes in the Discord that we're all a part of. His name is Spartan Theology. He's actually, his name's Ethan, to be fair. I don't think his mom said, "Hey, Spartan Theology," but
that's a dope name to give somebody, though. If
it is a dope name. I call him Dr. Spartan Theology, but I don't think he has a doctorate or anything. And then we've also got Cease to Know, and again, I don't think his mother named him that either. And he is an atheist, and they both would like to talk to you simultaneously. So
yeah, can I just pour a cup of coffee for myself and get a little water?
Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead. I'll beatbox while you're doing that, okay? Actually, let me bring these guys in. Cease to know. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, how you doing? Can you guys hear me?
Let me
Can you hear me
get a
okay?
let me get a microphone check, bud. 1 2 1 2.
Can you hear me all right?
Can you say something
Yeah.
philosophical for me?
I think therefore I am.
There you go. Boom. Awesome. And Dr. Spartan Theology. Hey, what's up, buddy?
Hello.
Hey, good to see you again.
Hey.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Good.
We just did a show, so
I did see some of that, by the way.
I saw you there.
I got a chance to see some of it. Awesome job kicking his ass, Cease to know. That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't
We're
a debate.
pretty much in agreement.
Yeah.
No, it was a great chat. I'm gonna watch the last 20 minutes of it. That's the part I didn't get to see, so I'll go back and check that out. Oh, guys, go follow Spartan Theology. He's got a great little channel up and coming, so go check his channel. I'll drop you a link. You're a mod, Spartan. Drop you a link in the thing. You get a chance, making me do all the work. Anyway, when Mark comes back in, feel free to ambush him with as many questions as you want. He's very well equipped, is Mark. Oh, here he is.
Do you want to go first, or should I?
I got a pretty quick one that I could
All
do.
right, guys, you better watch out. I took a Sinzu Bane.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what that means, but
Dragon Ball Z
Maybe
reference.
Dragon Ball Z, yeah.
okay.
Good show.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to bring up is so you and Austin go back and forth. Austin seems to be like struggling to accept like your God claim or whatever, but to me, like you're not really claiming, like when you say God exists, you're not claiming. It doesn't seem like that they should really have much issue accepting what you say exists. It's more or less just the way you describe it, or it could be wrong for sure. But like you're not really positing anything exists that, like, I think you're wrong that God, like the God I believe in exists. Like I think you're saying less things exist than I am, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because I think that you coming from your perspective that I imagine an Abrahamic God, right?
Yeah, I'm a
and all the
Christian.
bells and whistles. So you're seeing my statement, of course, because you're at a different position on the spectrum. You're looking farther away, and you can see how almost like me and the atheists are saying the same thing in a lot of ways, except they can't accept the divine spark.
Yeah,
Because you're away on the spectrum, you can see us much closer together. Where we're sitting next to each other, they see this great divide, and it literally is just divine spark. Really, at the end of the day, is the thing they're disagreeing with me on.
Yeah, because I think God is like completely outside, like completely outside of us, and you wouldn't believe that being exists.
Well, here's what I would say. I don't necessarily believe for sure that there isn't something going on outside of the universe. My thing is basically the only thing I can concern myself with is what I'm able to perceive. And so if someone said no, like if God came down and said, no, I'm outside the universe, I'd be like, you got it, man. I'm not disagreeing with you. Like it would be immediate. And if you look at like Kabbalistic beliefs, right? They believe that there's higher realms and higher realms and higher realms, and there's projections downward. So there very well could be. I'm not so much refuting it. I'm more just not concerning myself with it because I have no capacity to be able to do anything about figuring out if it's true or not.
That's fair. I mean, that's pretty much what I had. I have more, but I can let Cease to Know go.
Okay, well, I have quite a bit to say here. Maybe we can break it down here. But let me start out by saying that, look, I do think you come from a genuine place, okay? And in that sense, I respect you. When I first saw your videos, I thought you were either a lunatic or someone trying to use power over people.
Yeah.
And I can say now, having listened to enough of what you have to say and sort of see you clarify some terms, I don't think that. I do think you're a nice guy.
Thank you.
So what I say is not meant out of disrespect for you on any level.
Yeah.
But I think you are fundamentally severely confused on several aspects of the way in which you approach this conversation, and the language you're choosing to support an ideology which to some degree I can get behind, I think is actually detrimental to what I think you want to see in the world. So the first thing I want to say is I think this will be kept. We should talk about this maybe more at a later time.
Yeah.
But your use of the word energy and connection, and your mention of quantum mechanics, you are taking concepts that have a very specific context, and you're redefining them to some degree in a sort of a new age context, which is actually not what the science is really saying.
Could
So
you
to say that-
clarify? Could you clarify what statements in particular? Because I'm not a quantum physicist, so I may be misusing things. But just clarify specifically.
Well, for example, one term you've used is the term energy. You use the term a lot, energy.
Energy.
And I don't think you use it correctly in the context of where that word is actually comes from. Now, my brother is a quantum physicist. I think I would feel much more comfortable seeing that conversation between you two than having that conversation between us. Because
Okay, I just want to know in what way you think I'm misusing the word energy.
I think you're sort of conflating energy with some sort of spiritual connection among people that I forget exactly.
Well, yeah. So I'll break it down to you what I said. I said that with the forces of nature and the 17 subatomic particles, they are interrelated things that really actually network them together through the forces. For instance, gravity, as it becomes weaker and weaker at an exponential degree when you leave a body, when you separate two bodies, the connection between gravity never stops. And so Sirius B has a gravitational pull on me right now. Regardless of how far we go out into space, gravity is always interrelated to every other object in the universe. And so all I was saying was that there is an actual provable network proven by the forces of nature that just connect all particles together. And so that's true.
True, but to what degree and in what way? I mean, that's a different thing than saying, everything's consciousness or. Well,
that's another thing. Is I didn't say everything's consciousness either. Like,
okay,
we have to redefine what consciousness is too. Think about this, right? So we're conscious in a certain amount of ways, and there are a bunch of layers to that consciousness too. Like being able to think one's own thoughts, consider the past and the past, and think about the future. That those are layers of human consciousness that are very unique to us. And like, for instance, elephants, it's been proven that elephants can consider the past because they can carry the bones of their loved ones for long periods of time and feel emotion for that. And so that's a layer of consciousness. But like, what is consciousness, right? Because is a cat conscious? To a certain degree, yes, right? Because it exhibits some behaviors that we have consciously. And so I don't think that like everything's conscious in the way we view consciousness in human existence, but we don't know where to draw the line on what consciousness is exactly. It's really just a word at the end of the day. Is a rock conscious to a certain degree that we are incapable of understanding?
Well, I would say there's no reason to assume that.
And I wouldn't either. I don't know. I don't assume it either. I just wonder.
But I didn't catch the whole show because I was on this other show.
Yeah.
But I think the mistake here is you're using the word God interchangeably, because when you're talking about communism, you have to look at what else those people believe. There's nothing. Atheism as a position is simply a rejection of a particular claim. It's an amoral position.
Yeah.
Now, so the fact that you want to point, to those societies, and then say, "Oh, well, look what happens when people remove God from their culture," I think it's a mistake, because they're not removing love. Like it wasn't just the removal of the God as a concept, as a claim of this supernatural being. They had other political ideologies and ideologies about human nature and morality that had nothing to do with atheism or humanism or anything like that. So to blame that, to point the atrocities that took place and say that it has to do with a lack of God, no, it has to do with a lack of love. Now, if you want to redefine God to be love, fine. But be aware of the baggage that terminology has and how that's going to come across to everybody else, and atheists and otherwise. In reality, those societies functioned like political religions. they didn't care about skepticism. Their atheism and the way they organize their society had nothing to do with free thinking and skepticism and inquiry and rationality. Okay, it had to do with control and having power over people. I mean, to say Stalin was 100% a dictator. Now, yes, there was a history. I can agree that there's some overlay, with Marxism and all those other things. But I think to some extent you're sort of making a soup of concepts that are not really connected with each other the way that you're claiming they are. And the disadvantage, and to then say that, when you believe in the godly, you have an extra layer of morality. From my perspective, as someone who's been doing philosophy for 17 years, that is nonsense. But again, it depends how do you define God? Because if by God you mean love and empathy and not sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Rejecting the other and trying to find common ground and humanism and those kind of things. Well, then I'm on your side, but none of those things require belief in anything supernatural. They don't require belief in what you've called a divine spark. All they require is a basic understanding of what is consciousness, what are states of suffering and well-being in relation to consciousness, and how can we go about constructing a society which it maximizes the well-being of individuals and the greater society as a whole.
Yeah.
So when you use the word God to sort of support this core of empathy, you are playing with fire, because you're bringing on into the conversation a baggage of language and of concepts that people project into this language that I think actually get in the way of the message you want to bring across. That's my perspective. I just think that I have a problem with your approach, not necessarily the content of some of your beliefs.
Yeah, so let me just answer some of those things you said. So, for one, I don't think the absence of the God is the entirety of why communists killed all those people. I firmly believe that the absence of the divine love. Now, remember, look, when we think about love, there's intimate love, there's familial love, there's friendly love. I'm talking about something much higher called divine love. A divine love where we respect all people regardless if we're sexually attracted to them, if we're related to them, this, that, and the third. What I'm saying is God, in many ways, has a piece of it that is a higher version of love that's very complex, and that was taken out of the Soviet Union. But also, identity politics were put in the Soviet Union, for instance, and this hatred of the kulak is what led to a lot of death. Obviously, like there's so many different things, but I do think it's a contributing factor. And the reason, so imagine me on an island in the middle of the world, and the island has the secret to our peace and harmony in civilization that we haven't been able to have for the entire time we've been human. I have to build bridges because there's a bunch of other islands. So there's one island that's Christian. There's one island that's Islam. There's one island that's atheism. In order for me to build the bridge for Christians, I have to use the word God. In order to bridge to atheists, I have to use the word universe. God may not be the perfect word to use, or Allah might not be the perfect use, although Allah is a very beautiful word, and I often refer to God as Allah. But what I'm trying to say is that all of those words mean the same thing, but I'm not going to convince a Christian to come to the table for conversation by saying, would you like to talk about the universe with me? So right now I have to use those words because I have to, what I'm trying to do is reconcile all the different translations of the same idea into one space for discussion so that atheists and Satanists and Luciferians and alchemists and witches and Christians can all get together and finally agree upon their belief system. We don't have a unified belief system, and I think we need that, which is more humanist. Like, I would agree almost entirely with Sam Harris. Me and Sam Harris agree 99% of the time, 99%. And where I disagree with him is the same place Jordan Peterson disagrees with him, that there is some linguistic and conceptual value to the appreciation of something called deity, which is divine.
Spartan, you want to reply and then I'll respond?
I was just about to say, Spartan. I'm going to give you a couple of questions before we wrap. We're coming up at the 3-hour mark.
Woo.
Mark's been killing it. So,
Yeah.
Cistino, thank you for coming on. By the way, if you don't mind, I'm going to drop you off. Mark, you want to link up with Cistino? I can get you Cistino's details.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that Cease isn't privy to, Mark and I are actually going to do a podcast together. We're going to have a slightly deviation from this. It's not really going to be pounding away at Mark. It's more of a conversation about life and things. Cease, if you want to be a part of it, man, we can do that on this 100%. Platform. Yeah,
there's so much that I want to respond to what you just said, Mark. And I actually don't think that we disagree all that much in the larger scheme of things. But there are some things that you said that I really want to respond to, but I don't want, I know that.
Yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation sometime for sure, man. Absolutely.
Hey, big shout out to Loki as well, Craig, the Mad Scotsman. He even mentioned in a comment about Mark's video. He's like, I really can't disagree with much of what he says, and this is another lack of believer in a sense, and a lot of what you say, Mark. It lines up a lot with what we believe or lack of belief.
Well, Pastor Mike, they'll look back 1,000 years from now and say that Mark, he was the great unifier.
Yeah,
that's the goal, man.
Hey, this is being recorded for our security and safety. But hey, thank you, Cease. I'm going to get you off, all right, bud?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess it's just me. Okay. Yeah, so I really thought this conversation was awesome. I thought your last one was pretty interesting, but I definitely see how this one was a lot better. So I just want to say I appreciate you sticking it out for about 3 hours. That's pretty I couldn't do it.
Like I said,
yeah. The only thing, and I don't want to go back to the beginning or anything too much, so we can just stay high level. That's fine. The only part that got me is just and it's been kind of overall, but it's just your use of language just is where I struggle, because it's you're able to basically say any word actually means whatever you want, in a sense. I just feel you're renaming God. That's basically what you just said. You're just calling God this thing. I don't know. I just it feels you could just. It seems if people, I don't see how that's unifying belief, because it feels everybody's just going to come in, be okay, we all agree. And then when they talk to each other, be well, actually, we all think completely different things. We just agreed to use these words.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So I'll give you an example. Imagine the true one God. Imagine there's a true one God. There's a highest principle God that's the perfect thing. And because our brains are so tiny, we're just little people, insignificant, there's no way for us to wrap our heads around exactly what God is. But what we do is we have religious experiences, we have this divine understanding, or we use the empirical method to understand something about God. We take a piece of him. That God, the piece of God, is planted like a seed in the ground and grows into a religion. And so you have things like Christianity, then you have Buddhism, and then you have Islam, and you have alchemy. And if you look across all those, they're distinctly different. And what they all did is the same thing I'm doing. They defined what God meant, and then they established what they thought was the righteous way to live in life. All I'm doing is planting a new seed that's going to be relatable to all human beings on the planet, regardless of what they believed before, like a super religion, I guess you might call it, that still allows everyone to have their own particular beliefs, but kind of like how international law sometimes supersedes national law. There'll be almost like a higher superseding belief system which governs the behaviors of all the ones up below, because Christians and atheists still disagree. There's Christians and Muslims still killing each other. There's Muslims and Buddhists still killing each other. This is a problem. And then that's because of the mistranslation between gods. I'm trying to be the great translator.
Yeah, see, that's where I disagree, because I feel there's claims in Christianity and Islam that make them mutually exclusive. There's just no way they can, and not that we can't live together in peace. I definitely think that's possible, and that would be awesome. I'm all for that. I'm not one that but we're never going to agree.
Can I tell you where you guys fundamentally disagree, Christians and Islam?
Sure.
The reason that you guys can't get along is because I think, now this is just my opinion, I think that Christianity is mistaken in that Jesus Christ as a sacrifice for our sin to salvation is incorrect. I think the message of Christ was ignorance to enlightenment, and that we can get to a place where we could have a almost superhuman nature to us. And so that not that Jesus was God, but that Jesus realized he was God, and it changed the way his psychology and his physiology worked so that he became God-like. And so that's one thing that stops Christianity from being connected to Islam, because Islam just sees Jesus as a prophet. But if we reframe from Christianity what Christ means to anybody could attain Christhood, and it's actually a physiological and psychological phenomenon, Islam could jump on that for sure, right? Like that's where like one of
Yes, yeah, I just feel like that's another version of like redefining words. Like Christianity would never agree with that. Like it's not, you'd have to throw out the entire Old Testament, the entire New Testament, and then there's no religion anymore. It's not Christianity. It's just,
well,
I mean, we could find out that Christianity is false. I mean, that's perfectly, like, I'm willing to admit that that's possible, but like we're never going to get to a point where Christianity believes that Jesus was just a man who ascended to be God. It's not Christianity at that point.
This is why I love Sparty. I gotta tell you, this is why I love Sparty, though. Golly, I love Sparty. Hey, I don't speak to too many theists like Sparty, man. You too, Mark. You too. But I gotta give Sparty some props, man. He's one of these guys that'll come up and tell you like it is.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, can I just wave one shout out? Murder Shed Steve is getting so many wins tonight. It's mind blowing. Can I read one of the private chat stuff that he said? There's nothing offensive in it.
No, go ahead, my man. We love Murder Shed Steve. He's our boy.
Mark is trying to literally be the middle ground and sacrifice getting shit on for doing so. Therefore, a martyr, God like Christ. Steve, absolutely. I'm sacrificing myself, like psychologically, linguistically, to trying to train. I'm the sacrifice psychologically, so everyone gets in the room together and we can assimilate all belief systems. I've seen it like that before, actually. That I'll be on TikTok and everyone, yeah, hey man, I'll be on TikTok sometimes and I'm like, I'm getting brutalized by Islam on the right, Christianity on the left, witches on top, you know what I mean, and atheists on the bottom. I'm like, I'm literally socially sacrificing myself to get everyone in the same room and talk to each other. How ironic.
I get exactly where your headspace is. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's a really good assessment, man. You hit it on the nose, because that was something 2 weeks ago I was like, holy shit. Like Mark, ironically, I'm a social sacrifice.
And Mark, before we pass it over to, Oz always, if Mike's not here, because Mike does the final thoughts, obviously, on our show. But if Mike's not here, we'll always hand it over to the Oz to close out the show. But before we do, thank the beast Spartan for coming on. Thank you, Murder Shed Steve. Thank you, Mark of Legend. You're always going to be. I'm Pastor of Legend, right? Can I be Pastor of Legend?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm Pastor of Legend.
You got to drink the Kool-Aid though with me.
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know about the Kool-Aid.
No.
I'll drink the Tang. I'll get the Tang out.
All right.
Right. But we thank Jesus, Mike. Everybody that came on, cease to know. Yeah, and everybody in the comments tonight. And what do you think? Like, Mark, the questions that you were asked tonight, are there questions that stand out to you? Like, what really hit home? Or anything that got you thinking? What was your? I know you brought up the one, the things that Steve, you're secretly reading our private chat, which is totally fine, by the way. I'm just busting your nuts, your holy nuts. But
yeah.
Anything that you're leaving with that you can say, yeah, that question kind of got me. I guess this one then. I win.
Yeah. So I think that we're still having a small disconnect with how I see God inside of my head. But I guess the best part of all of this was our conversation on the precision of language, which I know I need to be better at. And that's a work in progress, right? Because I'm trying to take something that can't be said, and I'm trying to interrelate it to all these other, like universe, Allah, Buddha, or Brahma. I understand the hill that I'm dying on, right? And so, but I don't understand how to effectively articulate it in the Richard Feynman method of being able to tell it to a second grader. right? And so that to me was, I guess, the best set of questions, and the best challenges is that precision of words in trying to articulate what I'm saying. I obviously am still carrying a dull knife there.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I know that the misrepresentation of your position and what you consider to be the objective of your message back in April on TikTok was poorly articulated on our end back in May when we had you on. So for that, we're forever in your debt. So I hope we can at least put this behind us and say thank you for coming back on. Oz and Mike got an opportunity to have another conversation. I think you and I are still going to chat one day, and that's to be continued. And if you want to get in touch with Spartan, go on Spartan's show. He's got a great show. It's a little bit more intimate, and yeah, he's got a great show. Go and chat with Spartan. And Oz, you got any final thoughts before I meet you? Anything?
Yeah, Megan.
Megan. Yeah, Megan Christ.
What was your name? What was it?
Which one?
What was it?
Oh, I ain't doing it. I ain't falling for that trap.
It doesn't matter what your name is. No, we had tons of fun with Mark this week, and leading up to the show, and we'll have him back on. We'd love to have Mark back on, and it was a great night, and I'm just glad that we got to open a can of whoop ass on your candy ass tonight, Mark.
You know what I think we need to do?
And that's the bottom line. No, that's the bottom line, because Austin said so. Austin 316 says, we just whooped your ass.
Left me
hey, Mark, and it's back to the two of us again. But hey, I wanted to say what we didn't talk about tonight, which we're going to put a peg in, is something that we can get into on our discussion.
Yeah.
Is shadow work. That's what you and I that's all I'm going to say, my friend. You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
I went out of my way not to talk about it tonight. You understand?
Yeah. Save that morsel.
Yeah. So you and I, to be continued. It's going to go like this. Shadow work. Okay, you understand?
Ooh.
With that being said, I'm going to rip off one of Austin's phrases. With that said, thank you for visiting the Atheist Roundtable. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Atheist Roundtable on the YouTube. And visit us at TART.live. And again, respect to Mark of Legend. We do greatly appreciate him coming on for a second time. And don't forget to mute Oz every chance you goddamn get. Isn't that right, Mark?